Tonight, the sensational trial that just finished. Why would a beloved family man suddenly disappear on his family and friends?
And then tell them not to come looking for him. The stunning courtroom confession on an all-new 2020 beginning right now.
I'm living in the Twilight Zone and I can hear the theme song going on. He opened the door and he was covered in blood.
He was here one moment, gone the next. There's no goodbye, there's no I'll talk to you later, there's no nothing. He was gone.
Getting these weird messages.
Roses are red, violets are blue, my wife is a whore, your husband is too.
My family and I are begging you, asking for your assistance.
Nothing added up. Nothing made sense.
Had she ever mentioned anything about Mike, concerns about Mike?
She's sobbing. She's just, I know he's coming around. There's stuff, doors that were closed or open. And
Lori told her that Mike got picked up in a black SUV one day, never came back. And I started putting those pieces together.
It made it alarming. It gave me chills. Everything that had been happening for the last 2.5 years was likely a lie.
There was just more and more twists and turns.
I asked, well, when's the last time you seen him? And frankly, I said, years.
What? This is Claremont, Florida, a rural community about 20 miles west of Orlando, but a world apart from the tourist-filled amusement parks. Michael and Lori Shaver were raising their 2 children here when his lifelong friend, Scott Amatuccio, started to get worried.
We were best friends. We were just always around each other. I could tell something was off. I just haven't heard from Mike for a while. I had texted him at some point in time. He never responded. And then I'm like, what's going on with Mike's Facebook? I go to his page and he wasn't even my friend anymore.
For friends so close, an unexplained social media slight like this was too strange to ignore. And it turns out Scott wasn't the only one worried.
I would get strange messages. We were just questioning it. Like, is he having that many troubles that he has to turn away from his family?
The communication went down and it seemed to be it was just a text or a social media Facebook message.
We had conversations all the time about where's Mike?
Have you seen Mike? Have you heard from Mike?
Someone said Michael just took off in a black SUV and never came back. None of this adds up.
Clearly, something wasn't right.
Michael was missing.
He was here one moment, gone the next. He was gone.
Everybody's hair was raised. What's going on?
It was that concern that started the unraveling of a years-long mystery as deep and dark as the lakes that surround this place.
Hi, I'm Michael Shaver. Oh, there I am. That's me. See?
Michael grew up the 3rd child of 4 with his brother and 2 sisters in the tiny rural village of Lawrence in upstate New York.
Our relationship was a very special bond. My mom was a single mother, so I would help my mom out whenever she needed help with Michael. I would always put Michael first.
This is a photo of Mike and I. We're at my house that I grew up in. We would just have fun as kids, ride our bikes all day long and go on adventures, always playing around the neighborhood. She was great at playing drums. Eventually, he learned to play guitar. We used to have this band. we called it Rifles and Dandelions. It's the Guns N' Roses. That was our silly way of coming up with a band.
As a young man, Michael showed a talent for working with his hands.
I played with tools all my life. I believe that the genes were passed on to Michael because as a kid, he used to repair stuff around the house.
He would go around the town and people would actually give him stuff. He would fix it.
He may take
an old bicycle or something and fix it up and make it work again for somebody. And it's like a sense of accomplishment, saying, I fixed that.
One time, him and his friend built an airplane out of wood in the backyard. And I swear if they'd had a motor, they would have taken off with it. It was really something. You should have seen it.
Michael's love of tinkering with things, I believe, led him to wanting to work on airplanes. And then as he got a little older, he wanted to learn how to fly.
Flying wasn't the only thing Michael loved. By the time he got into high school, his head was also in the clouds for Lori Paddleford, seen here in their yearbook.
We all grew up together. It was around 7th or 8th grade. Mike had a crush on Lori. He wanted to figure out the best way to ask her out. We had come up with this great idea of playing Boys to Men in the background. So that's how they ended up dating.
I don't think I really understood how serious it was until after they graduated. Then they were talking about marriage.
This is a picture of Mike and I at his wedding. I was his best man, and this was us together.
Their wedding was beautiful. Lori, she was so happy. I remember Michael couldn't stop smiling.
He eventually got his commercial pilot license, worked for Piedmont.
He loved it, and he used to take his friends up and do loop-the-loops with them, and they loved it.
Soon, Michael and Lori became parents to daughter Isabel and her younger brother Aiden. After moving up and down the East Coast, Michael and his family ended up in the Sunshine State.
When I moved down to Florida, it's when they moved down to Florida.
They moved to Claremont, bought a property, 5 acres. It's pretty rural. It's beautiful lakes, some rolling hills. It's pretty quiet.
He had chickens and guineas and turkeys and quite a few ducks, and he wanted them to have their own duck pond.
In his off hours, he worked as a mechanic for Precious Metal, a local flight team that performs in races all over the country.
We were both volunteers for the Precious Metal air racing team. Reno air racing has been compared to NASCAR of the sky. It's multiple planes on a closed course at one time. Speeds are up to 500 miles per hour. You're 50 feet off the ground. It's a huge adrenaline rush. We spent several years, several long nights, sometimes 3 days in a row working on the plane together. The people who described him as a genius, I would agree. He just took care of it. He knew that the job was going to be completed as it should.
Lori worked from home for an insurance company while Michael was away for days at a time working as a pilot. Wanting to be with his family more, Michael quit the airline business for another dream job. This one at the most magical place on Earth.
Mike and I worked at Epcot together. He was a mechanic.
Working at Disney was just his little kid inside, and he loved that job. You know, he was flourishing.
But then, for some reason, dependable Michael just stopped showing up.
He was here one moment, gone the next. No goodbye, no nothing.
It seemed Michael Shaver was blowing off his friends, his family, even his job.
When the manager contacted Mike, Mike's response was, "You can go ahead and fire me, I'm not coming back."
But if Michael Shaver wasn't coming back, where exactly was he going? In the fall of 2015, Michael Shaver, father of two, a mechanic who loved to work on and fly planes, seems to just fall off the grid.
He was here one moment, gone the next. There's no goodbye, there's no I'll talk to you later, there's no nothing. He was gone.
It was a disappearance that just didn't make sense to Michael's friends, who wondered, after nearly a decade marriage, could this have something to do with his rocky relationship with his wife, Lori?
I'm Wilma Nicholas,
and I was the neighbor for Lori and Mike Shaver. Mike was about the same age as my oldest son, so he was kind of like another son to me. My home was probably 50 feet away from their home, no trees in the middle. I would be just outside doing my chores and I could hear the arguments happening inside. I talked to Lori. I just said, "You guys okay? You know, I hear you fighting sometimes."
Lori acted like everything was fine. She was all smiles and he was all smiles, and they covered it up pretty good.
I had no idea the extent of what was going on. I guess that's typical. Nobody knows what's really going on inside the house.
On a hot, late summer afternoon, the simmering tension inside the house erupts.
911, do you need police, fire, or the ambulance service? Please, I'm on my way to the sheriff's office right now. I got my kids in lost. What's going on? It was a domestic violence dispute. My hand is bleeding.
I had just gotten home from work and my phone rang and it was Mike. And he said, "Can you come over? I need your help." I opened the door and he was covered in blood. Blood streaming down his face. There was torn clothes. I took a whole lot of photos just in case he needed it at any point in the future.
There was a domestic abuse incident in September of 2014 at Michael and Lori's house.
We're dealing with a scenario where we have the allegations made by Lori Shaver.
Lori tells the 911 operator she and Michael have been fighting a lot lately, but it never got physical until that night.
I grabbed my gun because he has a gun and I hit him in the head with it. I grabbed my kids and left. He pulled out a gun on you? Oh, yeah. He grabbed my car keys and stuck them in his pocket. I fought him to get my keys out of his pocket, and then I grabbed my kids.
Mike's version of events was she was the one that grabbed the gun. She was the one that was initiating the violence. He was trying to calm the situation down.
He said that they had been in a fight and Lori had threatened to kill him and herself, and that they had wrestled with a gun.
Has there been any drinking tonight? Yes, there has. We each probably had 3 beers since 2 o'clock. You both had 3 beers? Yeah.
Michael admits he kept the car keys from Lori to prevent her from leaving, but he says that's because he didn't want his wife driving with the kids after she'd been drinking. Both say during the struggle, Lori hit Michael on the head with her revolver.
The revolver that was on the bed looked like a .38, and it had pink plastic grips. Then I noticed there were roses all over the floor.
She didn't go up to Michael Shaver and just wail on Michael Shaver. He had a handgun he pulled on her, and I believe she tried to deflect the gun and it hit him.
Police are unable to determine who started the physical altercation with the pistol.
Ultimately, Michael is arrested for not anything dealing with the firearms, but he admitted, "I grabbed her," and law enforcement arrested him for battery.
The battery charge is ultimately dropped, but things are never the same between the childhood sweethearts. Both Michael and Lori dug in and pointed fingers at each other.
Lori had been the victim of years of physical abuse by Michael Shaver. These acts were extreme. Lori was locked in a closet. Lori would be physically beaten.
I never heard Mike, scream at Lori or do anything physically. Lori trying to paint Mike into this monster and the abusive person in the relationship. Everybody that knew Mike knew that wasn't the case.
I do think Lori was abusive towards my brother and controlling. She would only let him talk for 20 minutes on the phone to me.
His friends would say that he'd come around and have bruises, and they'd ask him what was the matter, what happened, and, "Oh, Lori got mad."
Michael Shaver was not some innocent victim that married some violent woman. Michael Shaver was an aggressive guy, and she was always the victim of this aggression.
In the fall of 2014, a judge grants a no-contact order against Michael, and he's forced to move out of the house he shared with Lori and his kids.
Mike was staying in the airplane hangar where the precious metals plane was. I just figured it was for a day or two. And later on, I learned that he'd been down there, for a week or even more.
He was living basically at the hangar. There was like a meeting room with some nice big comfortable couches. There was a shower there and a bathroom.
She would kick him out, he would leave, a month or two would go by, and then she would have him come back again.
Michael's friends say that while he was living out of the house, he still keeps tabs on Lori, suspecting she's seeing other men.
When they would split up and Mike would be gone, there would be men that would come over quite often to the house.
Michael believed that Lori cheated on him quite frequently. Lori always denied that she was cheating on Michael. He would say, "What do you think? Does it sound like she's cheating, or am I just losing my mind?"
There was a time where I think Mike just needed to know what was going on at home. He and a friend would fly over Mike's house just to see whose truck was in the driveway, maybe just to make sure nobody was there.
He was willing to overlook that and get past it, but it showed the love that he had of willing to fix stuff to be with his family.
He loved her so much, I guess he forgave her.
Michael's repeated attempts to save his marriage began to strain his other relationships.
I tried to go visit Michael and his children in Florida, and always at last minute, I would get a message saying that Lori said it was a bad time, that we shouldn't come down.
But soon the communication from Michael went from infrequent to almost non-existent. He seemed to simply vanish.
He was there at the tractor show, and then the next week he was gone, and there was nothing in between. It was just gone.
And when Frank checks in with Lori, her answer only deepens the mystery.
According to Lori, Michael blew out of town, didn't want to be part of the family anymore.
Gone without a trace. Or was he? Michael and Lori had a roller coaster relationship, but in the fall of 2015, things seemed to be going well. So well that Michael has moved back in with Lori and the kids.
I know that he went home and that they were trying to work things out. He had quite a few ducks, and they were staying with the chickens in the chicken coop. And he wanted them to have their own duck pond.
He was digging out a duck pond in the back for her ducks because she wanted to raise ducks and chickens. So he was home, they were back together again.
But then things take another turn. November 7th, 2015 is the day Frank Merritt says he will never forget. He and his family met Michael and Lori Shaver and their children at a local tractor show.
Oh, it was really hot that day. They do a show 3 or 4 times a year during the winter months. It's just a bunch of antique tractors and like a flea market. Mike was really into that stuff. He really liked that old stuff.
But Michael's friend and co-worker Frank says he could once again sense an unspoken tension between Michael and Lori.
She just wouldn't make eye contact with us. She wouldn't speak with us. And it was just kind of weird because she was usually more bubbly than that. And then he says, "Hey, I gotta go." So they left.
The next time Frank hears from Michael is by text, 2 days later.
He had texted me on Monday that he was gonna have to quit his job to save his marriage. So I just kind of backed out of it. I just left him alone. So when he didn't show up Tuesday, I didn't think nothing of it. It's just, well, he's got some problems. They'll work it out. And then Wednesday he didn't come, and Thursday he didn't come. And it wasn't until Thursday night that our manager came to see us.
After 3 days of no showing at work, Michael's manager reaches out to him and gets a surprising response back.
Mike's response was, "You can go ahead and fire me, I'm not coming back."
So just none of it made sense at all that Michael had sent a text message to his boss just up and quitting. He was known to be a very dependable worker and a diligent worker. That didn't add up at all.
Like, well, if he's not showing up and not calling, I'll go by and check on him.
But when Frank goes to Michael's house looking for answers, he only ends up with more questions.
Lori answers the door, asks where Mike is at, and she said he's not home. I said, well, what do you mean he ain't here? And I said, well, his car's here. And his car was in the driveway. So she said, he's not here.
Frank says Lori eventually told him that after a heated argument, Michael stormed off, catching a ride with his friend Robert to Georgia, and she hadn't seen him since.
Mike never told me he wanted to go to Georgia. He had never spoken about wanting to leave the state, leave the marriage, any of that. I thought he was happy here, and we were doing so well, and then it's like, huh, what an idiot. I felt like that was the wrong thing to do, it's just walk away.
I reached out to Lori through Messenger on Facebook, and I said, you know where Michael is? And she said, no, he left the kids, he's not paying child support.
This strikes Michael's sister Stacy as completely out of character for the brother she knows.
His kids meant more than anything in the world to him. He would not just up and leave his children.
And when I was texting with him, he says, I'm never coming back. And just wasn't answering his phone, never coming back.
I knew they were having some marital problems, so I felt like he needed some space.
He doesn't want to be involved with this craziness.
Could Michael have finally had enough of his rocky marriage and decided to ditch it all, his job included, and head north to start over?
It was his dream job. He would never quit. Nothing added up. Nothing made sense.
What was strange and unusual about the messages that Mike was sending to his friends and family?
The common theme of all of them would have been, leave me alone. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Just leave me alone. I don't have family.
He didn't want to be found. He wanted to be left alone. He was not coming back. He had abandoned his family, and he was gone.
These text messages were completely out of character for Michael. I think that the family really noticed that very quickly.
Michael's niece, Desiree Ruggles, got this text from him, flat out saying, I don't have a family.
Is there a reason why he's pulling away from our family? Because he doesn't talk to us anymore? Does he just need time? And I got a little angry, and I'm just like, you know what? If you don't want to be a brother, don't be a brother.
Just when it seems he's gone for good and his wife Lori is moving on,
Lori met Jeremy at a park, and their children began to play together.
Michael Shaver seems to show back up. Had she ever mentioned any concerns about Mike?
Yes. She goes, I know he's coming around. I know he's harassing me. There's doors that were closed or open. And I'm like, you need to get a restraining order.
Michael Shaver seems to be abandoning his life. He hasn't shown up to work, and when friends and family reach out to him, they get messages saying, just leave me alone.
According to Lori, Michael blew out of town, didn't want to be part of the family anymore, left the state.
Over time, with no sign of Michael, Lori moves on with her life, meeting a new man, Jeremy Townsend, or Jay, as he's often called.
He's in the military or was in the military. They ended up exchanging numbers, and a relationship developed.
Lori's fresh start also includes getting fit. She starts working with a personal trainer named Rebecca Filmer.
Got a girl? Way to work, way to work.
How did you meet Lori?
So I originally met her at Gold's Gym. I met her through her then boyfriend, Jay Townsend. He introduced us as his girlfriend at the time. She had just lost a lot of weight and she wanted to start working out. Lori was super sweet. She was just someone that was very easy to talk to. She liked going out to dance and stuff. So we just kind of connected.
Now you end up becoming roommates. You moved in this neighborhood with her.
Yes, we became friends pretty close.
So close that Lori confides in her about relationships with men, including what Lori says was a difficult marriage to Michael Shaver.
She told me she was in this relationship that he made her feel bad about herself. And And I started to understand why she wanted to lose so much weight, why she was so focused on her appearance. I mean, in session, she'd be in the mirror, like fixing her hair and making sure everything was just so.
And even though it seemed Michael had initially skipped town, Rebecca says Lori told her that she started to sense that he was back.
There was a time we're sitting in the living room and she's sobbing. She's just, I know he's coming around, stuff, you know, doors that were closed or open, and I'm like, you need to get a restraining order, you know, if it's getting that bad. She says, no, I don't want to be bothered. It's just going to kind of open up a whole nother can of worms.
Rebecca says Lori told her that she was divorcing Michael once and for all and moving on with her life.
And she goes, oh, I had court appearance to settle their divorce. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know, how did that go? She said it was settled. She's officially divorced. And I was like, perfect.
But Lori's new relationship is far from perfect. She knows that man she's been seeing, Jeremy Townsend, is already married.
Jeremy's wife didn't know about Lori.
And Jeremy doesn't seem to be leaving his wife anytime soon, something that texts between the two show was creating a strain on their relationship. In April 2016, Jeremy's wife, Vanessa, gets a surprise. She's at work one day when she receives a flower delivery, but it's not from Jeremy. The delivery comes with a strange card.
Roses are red, violets are blue. My wife is a whore. Your husband is too. Sorry about this. Check your Facebook message. We need to talk. Mike.
Then Jeremy's wife goes onto Facebook and finds a message from Michael Shaver informing her of the affair. He says he's installed a spy app on Lori's cell phone, and he includes screenshots of texts and explicit photos between Jeremy and Lori.
Basically, Mike was outing this affair.
Lori's relationship with Jeremy implodes after his wife finds out.
It was clear that he wasn't going to be leaving his wife. They were going to work it out, and him and Lori were over.
Lori moves on from Jeremy pretty quickly to another guy, Travis.
Travis Filmer was a youth leader at a local church. Lori met him through Rebecca.
I didn't know anything about her, but from appearances, she was really put together. I knew that she had kids. I saw how she interacted with the kids. So for me, that was a very important thing. I've always wanted kids. I've always wanted a family. I know when I was a kid and my parents got divorced, it destroyed me.
The sparks between Travis and Lori first flying during a bonfire get-together at Lori's house.
Her smile is the one thing that just, stood out to me. It drew me to her.
After that night, it was Travis this, Travis that, and I'm like, oh my God. Here we go. I think she has a type. When I've seen pictures of Mike and, the way that he would dress, it was similar to Travis.
We ended up going out to dinner. We just hit it off. We had a lot in common and decided to keep seeing each other.
Lori also told Travis details about her relationship with Michael.
From the things that she described to me, it was a very bad situation. She had told me that they were divorced. And I did ask if she was receiving any child support. And she told me that she wasn't, that he didn't want anything to do with the kids.
I'm Kendall Windsor. I'm Travis Filmer's mother. Lori was lovely. It was like he was with us one day, and then the next thing you know, he's living with Lori.
This is the person I want to be with. Not only did I fall in love with Lori, but I fell in love with Aiden and Isabel too.
Travis and Lori's love affair is moving quickly, and on New Year's Eve 2016, they decide to have a wedding ceremony right here in Lori's backyard.
We had friends, family come over. It was fantastic.
I was told they were getting married this day, that time, and I showed up.
Lori had fixed up the 5-acre property prior to the occasion, putting in a backyard fire pit. The couple later etched their initials into the concrete around it. Lori walked out to the Brantley Gilbert song, Fall Into Me.
And so we're sitting on bales of hay. My dad walks her down the aisle.
The ceremony was underneath this big oak tree.
I, Travis.
Hi, Travis.
Take you, Lori.
Take you, Lori. We did this to really just show everybody and in front of God that we're committed to each other. This is a lifelong thing.
Travis, you may now kiss the bride.
Yay!
So Lori has moved on and put her ex Michael Shaver behind her. But Michael's friends and family have not been able to do the same, still wondering why it's been so long. At this point, more than 2 years since any of them have laid eyes on him.
Clearly, something wasn't right.
And that lifelong friend, Scott Amatuccio, is about to make a stunning discovery.
It made my stomach sink right away.
New Year's Eve 2016, Lori Shaver and Travis Filmer had a wedding ceremony in their backyard.
Until death do us part.
Just steps from that fire pit where their initials are etched in the concrete. And a year later, the couple had even more to celebrate.
And I looked at her and I was like, "Are you serious?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm pregnant." And I was just floored, like absolutely floored.
They would quickly add another child to their growing brood, along with the 2 kids Lori shared with her ex, Michael Shaver. Michael hadn't been seen by friends and family since he seemingly walked away from his life.
Michael would pop up every now and then with Facebook messages to his family, to his friends. I don't want to be bothered. I'm working on myself.
Even though the years were passing, friends and family said the occasional texts and Facebook messages led them to believe Michael wanted to be left alone.
Everybody rationalized it as give the man space. We knew what he was going through with the family by this point.
Yeah, I should have probably texted Mike more and called him, but we were never much into texting or phone calls. I had my first daughter, and I was so consumed in that. It was just not on my mind.
Scott then gets a phone call from his ex-fiancée, Katina Vasquez, that would change everything. She tells him she happened to be over at Michael and Lori's house 2.5 years ago, right after Lori said Michael skipped town.
She had noticed that Mike's possessions were there. Clothing was there, his wallet was there, his phone, all that was there.
His car was still there. His guns were still there.
Basically everything he owned.
Yes.
He walked away with nothing. I don't even know that he took his toothbrush.
Katina tells Scott that during that visit, she asked Lori where Michael was.
Lori told her that Mike got picked up in a black SUV one day, never came back. He would never do that to his family or kids. In a vacuum, you're not going to put anything together, but you start getting these other details. Clearly, something wasn't right. It's those details that made my stomach sink right away.
Eventually, Scott pieces together that no one has seen or spoken to Michael in 2.5 years. He decides it's time to reach out to Michael's sister in upstate New York to compare notes.
Scott and I just happened to be messaging back and forth one night, and we're like, none of this adds up.
Stacy and I had been talking, they were getting these weird messages. They'd be kind of short, out of character.
There was wording that he didn't use. He never called me bro.
There was a couple there that said, "Just leave me alone. I'm moving to California." Just some crazy stuff that just didn't sound like him whatsoever.
He had texted me one day and asked, "What's Mom's number?" I tried to call her. It must have been changed. My mother's phone number has been the same for 30 years.
With his suspicions growing, Scott does what any of us might do when trying to track down his now long-lost friend. He logs onto Facebook.
I wasn't too active on Facebook back then, so I go to his page. And then I had noticed the profile picture had just been updated the month prior to some group of guys in a bar. I had to like zoom in and make sure like nobody looked like Mike in that picture.
Scott then does a reverse Google image search trying to determine where this photo came from. Turns out it matches a photo from a Bloody Mary mix company.
Clearly somebody took that picture online and put it as his profile picture.
And Michael's recent posts also seemed off. They were different from what he typically posted in the past.
His activity on Facebook was usually pictures of himself, pictures of friends, pictures of the plane that they would work on. All of that ended, and then it started up with various silly memes that were just not in keeping with his personality whatsoever.
Michael's friend Scott, along with his sister Stacy, knew it was time for something drastic.
Since I was in New York and Scott was in Florida, Scott told me that he would go to the police.
And when I called, I said I'd like to file a missing person report. You know, they asked, well, when's the last time you seen him? And frankly, I said, years. They didn't take me seriously at first because we're now filing a missing person report years later.
Scott is able to convince police in Florida that his concerns are serious enough to warrant a welfare check. And when a deputy goes to Lori Shaver's house, something catches his eye that's been hiding in plain sight for years.
And that's when I really started to getting chills up my back.
I'll take you there to see for yourself.
This has got to be the strangest case in my career.
What happened to your husband, though? Have you not seen him since 2015?
I had to rethink and re-question myself. Everything that had been happening was likely a lie.
And just when you think you know where this story is headed, a new twist.
Today, I'm coming to you. My family and I are begging you, asking for your assistance.
Everyone was just like, what?
There's just more and more twists and turns.
I'm living in the Twilight Zone and I can hear the theme song going on.
I've seen it on TV, on the news, but I never, ever imagined this would be happening next door to me.
That's when you knew something was up.
We just started asking her questions about the whereabouts of Michael Shaver.
Did she say why he left? What happened?
She did not. She has no idea where he would be.
Lori called me crying, saying the police are here and they're looking for Michael.
He proclaimed he had the special skill to kill somebody.
When you walked out here, were you immediately surprised?
I really started to getting chills up my back.
But what about the chills when a totally unexpected person confesses?
Everyone was just like, what?
When you have a witness take the stand that says, I had a role in it, that's pretty incredible.
I know it sounds weird. I know it does.
The reality is that he was digging his own grave.
That was one of the most bizarre videos I've ever seen.
This has got to be the strangest case in my career that I've ever seen. It was as though this guy had literally just vanished.
November 7th, 2015 was the last time anyone saw Michael Shaver alive. His family hadn't seen him. His friends hadn't seen him.
No one had actually talked to him on the phone or talked to him in person. It was very weird.
They will tell you he would never, ever leave his 2 children.
He had 5 acres of property and a tractor. He walked away with nothing.
It's been 2.5 years since anyone has seen or spoken to Michael Shaver. His loved ones are concerned. So his longtime friend, Scott Amatuccio, decides to call law enforcement. He requests a welfare check.
So this is South Claremont. We're probably 40 minutes northwest of Orlando. So this is a very rural area.
Corporal Corey Anderson was one of 2 deputies that respond to the welfare check call that day in February 2018.
It was out of the ordinary. I haven't seen a call like that in a long time.
What about it felt unusual to you?
Usually, a well-being check is, hey, I haven't heard my friend in a while. Can you go check on him or have him call me? Not anything like he's missing, he's not responding to calls, he's making posts that aren't like him to make. People just don't up and leave, you know?
So you pull up to the house. What's the first thing you do when you get here?
Deputy Morris and I, we meet, and then we approach the house together.
Did someone answer the door?
Yes, Miss Shaver answered the door. She had a 2-week-old infant in her arm, so she stood on the porch, and we just started asking her questions about the whereabouts of Michael Shaver.
What was her demeanor like? Was she friendly?
She was cool as a cucumber, and it made it almost alarming. It gave me chills speaking with her. Lori really didn't seem very apprehensive or nervous or surprised. The way that she was answering questions, withholding information.
What kind of withholding of information?
The dates that she used for when he was last seen, the last time he was at work, the day-to-day things that she would know weren't adding up.
Did she say why he left? What happened?
She did not. She simply said that he absconded and has not been seen or heard of. Has no idea where he would be.
Corporal Anderson then asks Lori if he could take a look in the backyard.
She welcomed them onto the property. She appeared to be very cooperative. She appeared as though she had nothing to hide. Obviously, they noticed it was a beautiful, sprawling 5-acre piece of property, and they were able to walk the outside of the property and look around.
The deputies noticed multiple outbuildings in the backyard, as well as a chicken coop, rabbit hutch, a fire pit, and an above-ground swimming pool. But when they ask if they can perform a more thorough search of the backyard, things take a turn.
And that's when her cooperation ended suddenly. She said, you guys need to get off my property.
Oh, immediately.
You can contact my attorney. So that was a huge red flag for me.
That's when you knew something was up. She shut that down and couldn't get them out of there fast enough.
So detectives got the report from the deputies, and they began to plan their next steps and how they were going to move forward to get back out to the property and do a more thorough search.
I had just left work. I was on my way home, and Lori called me crying, saying the police are here and they're looking for Michael. She was very upset. She seemed like she didn't really know what was going on.
Lake County deputies say it was his friend who initially reported him missing. Today, we're learning more about Michael Shaver.
I turned on the news, and that's when it hit that he's actually missing, that it's not good.
I remember thinking it's a complete misunderstanding. They're gonna find that he just wasn't where he was supposed to be. It just kind of snowballed into he's missing.
We're going to learn what happened to a man who's been missing. Channel 9 was there from the beginning. We went out to her house and said, hey, your husband's missing. Is there anything you want to say?
I wanted to ask you about the sheriff's office investigation into your missing husband.
I have an attorney.
You have an attorney? She basically told us to get away from her truck, and she didn't want to talk. What happened to your husband, though? Have you not seen him since 2015?
His wife didn't report him missing at all, and years go by. You would think a spouse would want to talk and get his picture out, get the information out. She blew by her cameras. She had nothing to say.
Meanwhile, as detectives are digging for more clues into Michael's possible whereabouts, they discover some startling information.
They learned that his driver's license was expired. There was not a new driver's license issued in any other state.
Good luck. Have fun. Thank you.
His pilot's license were expired. There was literally no trace of Michael, no matter what they tried, no matter where they looked.
Detectives then start interviewing Michael's friends, relatives, and co-workers. They start building a timeline to try to pinpoint exactly when someone last laid eyes on him. And it turns out they think it was at that tractor show that Michael and his family attended 2.5 years earlier with his friend and co-worker, Frank Merritt.
He was there at the tractor show, and then the next week he was gone, and there was nothing in between.
And it was just days later that Michael sent that strange text to his boss, abruptly quitting his job.
Based upon all of these bizarre circumstances, we knew something had happened to Michael.
3 weeks after that initial welfare check, detectives finally secure a search warrant for Laurie Shaver's property.
It was a huge scene.
There was law enforcement up and down the road.
Investigators come in with cadaver dogs, and they start searching the property.
I've seen it on TV, on the news, but I never, ever imagined this would be happening next door to me.
One of the cadaver dogs is walked along the backyard and alerts to a dirt mound multiple times.
That's when they brought in all the big guns, the big equipment.
We began digging up that yard. We dug a very significant area. We realized that there was nothing to be found there. The fire pit was our next point of interest. Once they started digging, we heard some yelling.
And all of a sudden I noticed activity happening and running around.
I could tell something had been discovered.
Investigators with Florida's Lake County Sheriff's Office are back at Michael and Laurie Shaver's home, armed with a search warrant. They're now scouring the property.
And they knew that it was something about that fire pit. Something was going on in that area.
The decision was made to bust up that concrete and dig down below that fire pit to see what we could find.
And there were tents up from investigators as they were excavating and sifting through the dirt.
Once they started digging, we heard some yelling. We knew we were onto something.
I have never seen anything like this before in person in my backyard. Oh, they're running.
At one point, investigators and the crime scene technicians, they're digging in that area. We see them put their hands over their eyes. We said, hey, something just happened.
And I can tell you that we have found what appears to be a bone that's consistent with that of a human upper arm bone.
They began to dig, and 3 feet below, there was Michael.
A gruesome discovery in a backyard in Florida.
Police are finding what are believed to be human remains.
What did you find in that gravesite?
There was a blue tarp, and beneath the blue tarp were the remains of Michael Shaver. His body was found to be wearing a pair of underwear, a pair of shorts. He had on a pair of socks. There was a piece of a fitted sheet also around the body. So it was evident that the body had been wrapped up and placed in that grave.
How deep was this grave?
About 3.5 feet.
Investigators say the remains were skeletonized and looked like they had been there for quite some time.
When the body was discovered, Laurie was sitting in her truck. My photographer and I walked over and we knocked on the window.
I'm on the phone with my attorney right now, and I'm not making a statement.
And shortly after, she took off. It just seemed strange that that's when she decided to take off and leave after being there for hours while the search was being conducted.
3 weeks before the remains were found back on the day of that welfare check, Corporal Corey Anderson was convinced there was something underneath that concrete. And this is where the fire pit was.
Yes, the cement slab was here.
It's what he noticed then that raised investigators' suspicions enough to come back with a search warrant.
As I was approaching the cement slab, you could clearly see a depression, and I took out my cell phone and just started snapping pictures.
And you saw that depression. Were you immediately surprised?
I was, and that's when I really started getting chills up my back.
You immediately thought it was a shallow grave?
Absolutely. It's unmistakable. It was the size of a human adult body.
It was really a remarkable sequence of events where a deputy who actually had the experience that this particular deputy did just asked permission, hey, maybe you guys mind if I take some pictures and walk around the back of the yard? The right person saw what started this case.
I mean, I considered Mike my best friend. It's pretty tough knowing that he's laying in the dirt like that.
It was absolutely devastating. Then I had to go and tell my mother. It was the hardest thing in the world I ever had to do.
I just started wailing and crying, and it's a terrible thing. It's just terrible.
As painful as that moment was, Michael's family says, finally, all the hurt and confusion around his unexplained disappearance made sense.
When they said that they got all the remains out, I knew in my heart that was Michael.
Are you guys Michael's family?
You know, even though it couldn't have been identified that day, I knew that it was.
Buried in the backyard. Police revealing new clues in the mystery disappearance of a husband.
That's just not something that we deal with and see every day. The media attention just grew.
Human remains were found buried in his wife's backyard.
The headline for the day was missing man's body found in his backyard. In that same place, his wife had remarried.
In the wedding video, you see her come down to that oak tree where they exchange vows. And her husband is dead, buried underneath that concrete slab that she's walking down to marry the next guy.
She had her wedding virtually on top of her husband's body.
We were sitting in the fire pit, by the fire pit, not knowing that Michael is under that fire pit. That's where I sat.
Until death do us part.
So this whole scenario, it's like I'm living in the Twilight Zone and I can hear the theme song going on. Do, 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 do. That's what's going on in my life.
Excuse me, sir. Do you guys know anything about what's going on inside? No comment?
When they found the remains under the fire pit, I couldn't believe that. Lori had kept telling me that she didn't know of anything.
But now investigators have Lori Shaver in their sights, and they want to hear exactly what she does know and when she knew it. After Michael Shaver's remains are recovered from a shallow grave in the backyard of the home he once shared with his wife Lori, the medical examiner determines that what put him there was a single gunshot to the head.
And that projectile was found inside of the skull. It was pretty much a straight-on shot to the back of the head.
Any DNA, any evidence of who would have put him there?
Pretty much everything in that grave site was sent to Florida Department of Law Enforcement for analysis, and there was no DNA that was found, mostly because of the decomposition process.
So over time, it's really hard to find DNA if it's in the ground, even if it had been there.
Yes.
But to many people's surprise, even after the gruesome discovery, Lori Shaver remains a free woman.
Lori wasn't immediately arrested, and that was something that was pretty frustrating for the family, but investigators had to build a case against her, and they knew that they would only get one shot.
Lori Shaver didn't get arrested right away.
Correct.
Why?
There were still phone records Facebook records to obtain and piecing together all of these different pieces of evidence to try to figure out what happened.
We knew he was last seen November 7th and didn't show up to work November 10th. So we believe it happened during those 3 days that he was killed by Lori.
If that's true, that's months before Lori met Travis Filmer, who says he believed she was divorced from Michael Shaver.
Lori didn't divorce her husband during this time that Michael was missing. Lori never went after him for child support.
Finding out that Lori was not divorced, that was a shock. And detectives are the ones that told me.
Travis says that after Michael's body was found, he and Lori didn't discuss the investigation.
Lori and I, we didn't talk about things. She never told me that there was a body on the property. I know based on my experience with law enforcement and being in trouble, it was extremely important for me to not ask about anything. Did I have questions? 100%. I very much did. But I knew that I could not talk to her about the case.
The detectives are asking questions, interviewing those close to Lori like Katina Vasquez, the ex-fiance of Michael's childhood friend. They wanted to know what she knew about Lori's supposed divorce from Michael Shaver.
She was telling me that she was filing for divorce. And then next thing you know, she's married. And I was like, how does that happen that quick? Like, it was just weird. Like, I'm like, this makes no sense.
Investigators also tracked down that friend of Michael's who Lori said picked him up in a black SUV and drove him to Georgia.
Did you ever give him a ride to Georgia?
Georgia? No.
No. Do you recall what kind of vehicle you owned?
I believe it was a Mitsubishi Galant.
Do you remember what color it was?
Blue.
When detectives talk to the Shavers' neighbor, Wilma, they hear something really dark and unexpected. She tells them Michael Shaver actually started the project that eventually became the fire pit and concrete slab where his body was found.
He was working very hard to make her a duck pond back there. And the reality of what he was doing was that he was digging his own grave.
What physical evidence was there?
We have a body buried in the backyard. We have evidence of a gunshot wound. And we have a caliber bullet that was consistent with the type of weapon that was sold by Lori Shaver.
Another witness comes forward to say that after Michael disappeared, leaving everything behind, Lori began selling his belongings.
You are the owner of JB Guns in Bushnell, Florida, is that correct?
I am, yes, sir. After I had seen the news report and I saw the lady's picture as in the wife of the missing person, I was like, I bought all of his guns, I'm pretty sure of. She's like, well, he just up and left. And I'm just selling all this stuff.
Key to this case, police think Lori Shaver was hiding that her husband was gone for good, pointing to data suggesting those Facebook updates and messages to family and friends, seemingly from Michael, were actually coming from her.
These Facebook message postings by both Lori Shaver's account and Michael Shaver's account had the same IP address, which means the same person was using them both.
Everything pointed back at Lori Shaver.
More than 2 years after Michael Shaver's remains were found, his wife has now been arrested for his death.
Lori Shaver is charged with second-degree murder with a firearm. She pleads not guilty.
I didn't understand how she was possibly arrested. Yes, they're saying that they found a body on the property. Yes, they're saying that Lori had some major involvement in this. There's always two sides to a story. There always is. There's no doubt in my mind that Lori she didn't kill Michael.
After about 2.5 months in jail, Lori Shaver is released on bond.
That's when this bizarre video surfaces of Lori and her defense attorney making a plea to please donate to her defense fund.
Good morning, I'm Jeffrey Weggs. Sitting to my left is Lori, a client of mine.
I don't know why I've been targeted, why I've been set up, or charged with this heinous crime. I am not guilty. I am a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a neighbor, I'm a servant of God, I'm a wife, and I'm a devoted mother of 4.
In that same video, Lori's attorney says his client is innocent, and at trial, they are prepared to say who actually killed Michael Shaver.
We're not going to mention his name. He proclaimed he had the special skills to kill somebody.
As her trial nears, Lori Shaver's attorney makes another shocking claim. Now, it's not just one person responsible for her husband's murder, but 2. And who they say that second shooter is takes everyone by surprise.
Honestly, I've never heard such craziness.
Happening today, jury selection will begin in the trial of a Claremont woman accused of killing her husband.
In September, almost 9 years after Michael Shaver was last seen alive, prosecutors are now hoping to prove that Lori Shaver was the one who killed him. They'll have to do it without fingerprints, DNA, or other forensic evidence.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about common sense.
In your opening remarks, you made the comment that you have to use a little bit of common sense here.
We have the defendant's husband buried in her own backyard, and that points directly to Lori Shaver.
In their opening statement, the defense finally discloses who they say actually killed Michael Shaver. It wasn't Lori, it was Jeremy Townsend, or Jay, that man she had an affair with before meeting Travis. And they say someone else fired a shot too. Lori's then 7-year-old daughter, Isabel.
I shot my dad. That was a bombshell.
The defense presents a stunning story to the jury.
Isabel Shaver, when this young girl, in desperation and in fear, runs and retrieves the firearm. As she believes she shot Michael.
They were separated. Michael came in the residence one morning. Lori was getting the children ready for school. Lori refused to go back with him. He got angry, started beating on her. Lori ended up on the floor. Isabel retrieved a handgun, and she believes she shot Michael Shaver.
And at that very moment, the defense says Jeremy stormed into the house and took control.
And walks Jenny. Takes a gun from Isabel. Shoots Michael Shaver. Says, Lori, get these kids out of here. I'll take care of this.
But prosecutors say this story is preposterous. They argue that Lori Shaver acted alone and killed Michael for her own selfish reasons, to be with her then boyfriend, Jeremy Townsend. What is the motive here?
Lori really wanted to be with Jeremy. She actively sought to ruin that relationship between Jeremy and his wife.
She pretended to be Michael in order to out Jeremy to his wife. And she tried to do that through Facebook messages from Michael's Facebook account. And when she didn't get a response from Jeremy's wife, Vanessa, she sent a bouquet of flowers to Vanessa with a card.
The card that came with those flowers, did that include a message?
It did.
And can you go ahead and read that message to the jury, please?
Right.
That's okay. Ms. Townsend, is this a difficult day for you?
It is. Says, roses are red, violets are blue, my wife is a whore, your husband is too. Sorry about this. Check your Facebook message, we need to talk. Mike.
Flowers that were delivered to Vanessa Townsend were actually paid for from Lori Shaver's bank records. Up until this point, did you have any knowledge that your husband was potentially having an affair?
No.
Lori was convinced that Jay was leaving his wife, and that couldn't have been further from the truth.
State calls Jeremy Townsend.
He walked into the courtroom in a suit, but he looked like Aquaman with the long hair.
Was there ever a time that Lori Shaver expressed to you that she wanted you to leave your wife to be with her?
Yes.
And was that what you wanted?
No.
They're supposed to be friends with benefits, no strings attached.
He went on and said, I had nothing to do with this.
At any point did you shoot or injure Michael Shaver?
No.
At any point were you involved with disposing of the body of Michael Shaver?
No.
And after the affair was exposed, what happened with your relationship with Laurie?
I cut it off.
They say it's not the crime that gets you caught, but the cover-up. And prosecutors argue that Laurie's attempts to impersonate Michael online show all the signs of a badly executed cover-up.
Facebook helped solve the murder.
Michael's family up north had heard from his Facebook account.
Was there a period of time where you reached out to Michael Shaver in an attempt to communicate with him?
Yes. It says, hey, Uncle Michael.
And what was that response?
Who are you? I don't have any family anymore. I have no clue who you are. Now stop messaging me.
Laurie was using his cell phone and his Facebook account to present this facade that Michael was still alive.
The defense argues the digital evidence is unreliable. It could have been anyone accessing Michael Shaver's Facebook account.
You'll ask yourself this: how does this digital data prove that Laurie Shaver killed Michael Shaver? It doesn't.
But prosecutors say they have more than digital evidence. They argue that Laurie had access to multiple firearms that could have killed Michael Shaver, including the pink and black .38 caliber revolver that she sold after Michael was last seen.
Did you examine that firearm?
Yes, I did.
Were you also provided a projectile recovered from the skull of Michael Shaver?
Yes. The projectile was in very rough condition.
Despite the damaged condition of that projectile, were you able to determine the caliber?
In this case, the caliber was determined to be .38 caliber class.
But the defense points out that the bullet recovered from Michael Shaver's skull could not be definitively linked to her pink handgun.
Let me just see if I'm summing this up correctly. The projectile that was in the body could not be linked up to the gun that you're sitting there holding, correct?
All class characteristics were in agreement. The result of the individual comparison was inconclusive.
How many guns fit into that class?
Thousands of guns, if not tens of thousands.
With the state's case laid out, it's now the defense's turn, and they're about to call their star witness, Isabel Shaver, Laurie and Michael's daughter, who was just 7 years old when he was last seen alive. She's now 15 and says she's prepared to tell the jury what really happened.
Isabel, I'm sorry. I have to do this. Do you know anything about the death of your father?
I do.
Have you given thought to taking the stand?
Still haven't decided. I would love to be able to speak my story.
Now, the defense also confirms with me that they say her daughter will take the stand.
Laurie Shaver's defense is built on what she says really happened the day her husband died. And to lay out that story, they call to the stand the person they claim fired what they say was the first of 2 shots, her 15-year-old daughter, Isabel.
My name is Isabel Shaver.
Because she's a minor, Judge Carrie Rada does not allow Isabel's face to be shown during her testimony.
How old are you, Isabel?
I'm 15. I turned 16 this Sunday.
Would you explain your relationship to Laurie Shaver?
Laurie Shaver is my mother. Me and her are very close. She's like my best friend and a mom in one.
Has anybody pressured you to testify in this cause?
Absolutely not, no.
Do you know anything about the death of your father?
I do.
Do you know anything about how your father died?
I do.
Isabel tells jurors a stunning story that when she was just 7 years old, she witnessed a violent confrontation between her mother and her father, Michael, while the two were separated.
He pushed her onto the ground and he started kicking her in the stomach and in the back. And he was like saying that he was going to kill her at this time. I heard my mom screaming for help, obviously, and then he put his foot on the side of her face and pushed it into the ground, and I didn't hear her anymore. And so I went to my mom's room, and I went at her end table, and I grabbed her gun, and I shot him.
Isabel Shaver goes on to say that after she fired that shot, the man her mother was dating at the time, Jeremy, or Jay as they called him, came barreling into the house.
He took the gun from me, and then he shot him again. He told my mom to take us out of the house, take us to school. We are not to tell anybody. We can't call the cops. We can't say anything, or else he was going to do the same thing to me and my brother.
Isabel stated this house was so riddled with so much atmospheric tension that it just didn't seem different. It just was kind of the way they were living. But she didn't say anything to anybody about it.
Remember, Jeremy Townsend testified he had no involvement in Michael Shaver's murder or the disposal of the body. And when prosecutors cross-examine Isabel, they challenge her memory of this event.
You don't know what grade you were in when that happened, right?
I don't.
You don't know what month this happened in, correct?
Correct.
You don't know what year this happened in, correct?
Yes.
When you have a witness take the stand that says, I had a role in it, that's pretty incredible.
I think it was very clear that she was willing to do whatever she could to try to protect her mother and avoid her mom going to prison. It also is not consistent at all with any of the physical evidence. Her version of events involved 2 shots, and there was absolutely no question that there was only 1 shot in this case, and that was the one to the back of the head.
The defense would call Lori Shaver.
Next up, the woman at the center of the case, facing life in prison, takes the stand in her own defense.
Let's talk about the event that's landed you here.
I got up, got my coffee, and then that's when I noticed he was sitting out on the back patio. So I went out there, and we started talking, and it escalated. He was holding on to me. And at that point, I was just trying to convince him, like, okay. Enough. We'll work it out. And he told me not this time. I was screaming as he's smashing my face into the porch.
What's the next thing you recall?
I more or less heard it. And then I think I seen her.
What's Isabel do?
She had fired a gunshot. The next thing I recall is seeing Jeremy, and hearing the gunshot essentially at the same time. He tells me to take the kids, get them out of the house, and he would take care of it. He insinuated that if we said anything, that he was not going to take the blame for this.
So what did you do?
I took the kids. I left.
Lori Shaver tells the jury that when she came home that day, Jeremy was gone, and so was Michael's body. According to Lori, she had no idea his remains were buried in her backyard.
Lori, the jurors are gonna ask themselves, why didn't you call the police?
Scared? I didn't know what to do.
When prosecutors finally get their chance to question Lori Shaver, they challenge her for more details about what they say is a story full of lies.
The biggest question I have for you is, when did your husband get killed?
The exact date I cannot recall. It was beginning of May 2016. It was not November.
Prosecutors say Lori wants jurors to believe that Michael was actually alive in May because that's a full 6 months after he was last seen by anyone.
When he left and moved out, he left his car, correct? He stopped going to work and lost his job because of it, correct?
I was not aware of that at that time.
November 2015, he just vanishes off the face of the earth. No one can account for him, correct?
I don't believe that that's true.
The day that he showed up in May of 2016, what vehicle did you use to get to your house that day? So he gets walked? When you take what she said happened there that day and then just break it down, well, if that's true, where was Mike's car? If that's true, when his body is found, why is he dressed like he was in bed sleeping?
It's hard to make a story fit all of the different pieces of evidence if it's not true.
She made up this May 2016 story to distract. Jeremy Townsend talked to law enforcement 3 separate times. The evidence that has been presented is not that in May 2016, Jeremy Townsend shot this man in the back of the head. It's that Lori killed him in November of 2015. Mike is buried in her backyard. She's the one that installs the fire pit and puts the cement slab over his body. She lied to friends, family, and law enforcement about his whereabouts for years. All the evidence points to her because she is guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carnuccio. Mr. Wicks?
Yes, sir.
Has any single witness taken the stand and shown you one piece of evidence that established Lori Lee Shaver killed Michael Shaver? 0. 0.
And then it's left to the jury to decide which version of the story is the truth.
And you wondered in the end if the person who did this was ever going to be held responsible.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
Right now, closing arguments are done for the Lake County woman charged with her husband's murder.
She is facing 3 possible charges, 2nd-degree murder being the biggest one, up to life in prison.
The biggest thing that I struggle with and that my heart breaks for is my kids. I don't want to see the look on their face when I have to tell them Mom's not coming home.
The jury deliberates for just under 4 hours before returning a verdict.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of 2nd-degree murder.
The jury saw through all of her lies, manipulations, all of it. They didn't buy her story for a second. They didn't buy her daughter's story.
It was hard to hear Isabel saying those things about her dad, and I kind of feel really bad for her. Everybody that knows Mike knows he had a great relationship with both of his kids.
Your reaction, your thoughts as soon as that verdict came down?
Elation. We were very happy. This was a long time coming. It will not bring him back, but there will be justice for him finally.
It was celebration, sadness, several different emotions. She was part of our family, somebody that you feel that you love and you trust. So also a letdown in some ways, and to see somebody that you did care for at one time that did something so bad.
No, I did not get the answers. Why? Why wouldn't she have just let him go in a divorce? She could have carried on her life.
And she got married here.
Yep, right out there. We walked by here, walked through here, walked all the way out, and yep, right past, you know, a human being. That was just, it's so disturbing because, again, we've been out here. I've stood right where he was, and I didn't know.
It upsets you.
Yeah.
Michael, he was such a great, great person. He loved everybody with all that he had, and I think his spirit will finally be able to be at peace.
Lori Shaver was recently sentenced to life in prison for Michael Shaver's murder. She says she plans to appeal her conviction.
And for their part, Michael's family says they are hoping to establish visitation with the two children he shared with Lori. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News. Good night.
It was the kind of silence that sticks to the walls. The humidity in June of 1987 in Clearwater, Florida, made everything feel heavier, slower, as if the air itself was watching. On the corner of Bayshore Drive, beneath a flickering streetlight, 17-year-old Lena Cartwright was last seen alive. She had just finished her shift at a seafood diner, still wearing the blue apron that smelled faintly of fried shrimp and lemon soap. The manager said she waved goodbye, crossed the street toward her bike, and then nothing. She vanished into the night like the tide pulling back, leaving only wet sand and questions. For weeks, the town searched. Police dragged the canals, volunteers combed the beaches, and helicopters circled above the mangroves. They found her bicycle neatly laid on its side near a drainage ditch. No sign of struggle, no blood. Her purse was gone. Her shoes were still on the pedals. It was as if she had evaporated. The sheriff at the time, Tom Reddick, called it one of the strangest disappearances I've ever seen. He didn't know it then, but this would become the case that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rumors spread faster than the heat. Some said Lena ran away. Others whispered about a dark car seen idling near the diner, a man inside smoking waiting. The local paper ran the headline, "Teen Missing Family Fears Foul Play." But Clearwater was a quiet coastal town. Crimes like this didn't happen there. Not in 1987. People locked their doors for the first time in years. Parents followed their kids to the bus stop. The Cartwright house became a shrine of fading hope porch light, always on dinner table set for one more. Detectives chased every lead. A truck driver claimed he saw a girl matching Lena's description hitchhiking near I-75, but when they checked the security footage from the toll booths, the image was too blurry. Another man confessed only to be proven a liar seeking attention. Time dulled the panic into confusion. Months turned into years. Lena became another face on a yellowed poster, another name in a cold case file sealed and stacked with hundreds of others. In 1992, the case took a strange turn. A group of teenagers exploring an abandoned property off Gulf to Bay Boulevard stumbled upon a buried box. Inside, a Polaroid photo of Lena, eyes wide, hands bound with rope. Police rushed to the scene, but by the time they arrived, the ground had been disturbed by rain and curiosity. No fingerprints, no clues about who buried it. Forensic experts examined the photo. The background showed a wall with peeling floral wallpaper, 1970s design. But no one could identify the room. Some believed the picture was staged part of a cruel prank. Others thought it was proof that Lena had been alive for at least a short time after she vanished. The box was sent to evidence, filed away, forgotten under the weight of new cases. For the next 3 decades, the file sat in a metal cabinet at the Clearwater Sheriff's Department. Dust gathered witnesses, cheetah memories blurred. The sheriff retired. The diner closed. The drainage ditch where the bike was found was paved over to make way for a gas station. Life moved on, but the case never stopped breathing. It waited. Then came April 2024. A young detective named Marissa Dorsey, working cold cases with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, reopened the file as part of a digital backlog review. It was routine work scanning old files into the database, cross-checking DNA samples, reviewing leads that had gone nowhere. Lena's case was number 87, 243. When Marissa opened the evidence catalog, she noticed something unusual. The Polaroid photo had been tagged but never fully processed for DNA. The technology didn't exist back then. She sent it to the new forensic lab in Tallahassee just to clear it from the queue. 2 weeks later, the lab called back. They'd found something. It wasn't Lena's DNA. It wasn't her parents'. It belonged to a man named Richard Dean Feller, a former maintenance worker who lived less than 2 miles from the diner in 1987. He'd been arrested once in 1991 for assaulting a woman in Tampa, but was released after the charges were dropped. He died in 2002 from a heart attack. The news sent ripples through the department. They dug deeper. Feller had owned a property on the outskirts of town, now overgrown and half collapsed. The address matched the general area where the Polaroid was found. Detectives went there with ground-penetrating radar. Beneath the broken concrete floor of what used to be his workshop, they detected anomalies, shapes, voids, something hidden. They dug for hours in the Florida sun. Then the shovel hit metal. It was an old oil drum rusted shut. When they pried it open, the smell hit first, thick chemical unmistakable. Inside were fragments of fabric human bone and a bracelet engraved with the initials, LC. The forensic team worked overnight. Dental records confirmed the impossible. The remains were Lena Cartwright's. 37 years after she disappeared, she had finally been found. But the discovery only deepened the mystery. Among the remains were small items that didn't belong to Lena. A locket with another girl's name, Becky scratched on the inside, and a fragment of another set of bones too small to identify immediately. Reporters swarmed the scene. The headline hit every screen. Florida 1987 cold case solved missing teen's secret finally uncovered. But for Detective Dorsey, it wasn't over. She wanted to know why. Through interviews with surviving neighbors, they pieced together the story of Richard Feller Quiet Solitary, known for fixing things around town. He lived alone, rarely spoke. He had worked at the same seafood diner as a janitor in 1987, but quit abruptly weeks before Lena vanished. His old landlord remembered seeing him burning something behind the property that summer, said it smelled like plastic. The police back then didn't follow up. Inside the workshop, crime scene techs uncovered something chilling. Behind a false wall, they found dozens of Polaroids, all of different young women. Some bound, some unconscious, all taken in the same room, the room with the floral wallpaper. There was no doubt now Feller had been a serial predator operating quietly along the Gulf Coast, preying on vulnerable teens for years. The missing Becky was likely another victim never reported, never found. Detective Dorsey spent nights reviewing every inch of evidence, comparing timelines, cross-referencing missing persons. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Every girl vanished within a 20-mile radius, all working class, all between 16 and 20. The diner, the gas station, the laundromat, all places Feller had done repairs. He moved like a shadow, unnoticed, forgotten. But there was one more discovery. The secret that made this case unforgettable. Inside Lena's bracelet was a tiny piece of paper folded tightly, preserved in plastic. When forensics opened it, the ink had faded, but the words were still legible. "He's not who you think." It was Lena's handwriting. The note was dated the day before she disappeared. Investigators believe she had discovered something, perhaps caught Feller in the act, or realized he was watching her. Her last act was to hide that message in the bracelet she never took off. In the end, there would be no trial, no confession, no confrontation. Feller was long dead, his secrets buried with him. But the town remembered. The Cartwrights, now in their 70s, stood by the shoreline as the detectives handed them the bracelet. The mother whispered, "I knew she'd come home." The case closed officially in June 2024. But for those who lived through it, closure was a word that didn't mean much. The oil drum, the Polaroids, the note, they lingered like ghosts in the humid Florida air. Some nights, locals swear they can still hear the echo of a girl's bike bell near Bayshore Drive, faint but clear ringing once before fading into silence. Because in every town with a past, there's a corner the light never quite reaches. And sometimes it takes nearly 4 decades for the truth to crawl back to the surface. The headlines burned through every screen from Miami to Seattle. News anchors spoke Lena Cartwright's name, like it was new, like she hadn't been missing for nearly 40 years. Florida, 1987 cold case solved, they said. But the word solved didn't sit right. Something about it felt too clean, too quick, too final for a story soaked in so much dust and blood. In Clearwater, people whispered about the discovery, about the man in the oil drum, about the bracelet and the note. They wanted to believe justice had finally arrived, but deep down, no one really knew what had been uncovered or what was still buried. Detective Marissa Dorsey barely slept. The victory felt hollow. Her phone buzzed constantly, reporters, retired cops, old witnesses crawling out of the past. The morning after the announcement, she stood outside the old diner lot, now a parking space for a nail salon, and listened to the wind rustling through the palm trees. She imagined Lena there, 17 alive, laughing with coworkers. The world in 1987 felt so far away, like another country. But the ground still remembered. The crime scene at Feller's property was still active. Forensic teams moved carefully through the ruins of his workshop, photographing every inch, cataloging the smallest fragments. They'd found more Polaroids overnight, some buried under floorboards, others sealed in plastic bags. The total count reached 42. Every photo taken in the same dim room, always the same wallpaper, always the same camera flash reflecting off terrified eyes. But 3 photos were different. 3 didn't fit the pattern. They showed the same room, but empty. No girls, no ropes, no shadows. Just the peeling wall and a chair placed perfectly in the center. On the back of one photo in blue pen, someone had written a date, March 1987. That was 3 months before Lena vanished. Marissa felt the hairs rise on her arms. The photos weren't trophies. They were documentation preparation. Someone had been rehearsing. In the evidence lab, technicians worked in silence. Under UV light, they found partial prints on the edges of 2 Polaroids. Feller's prints matched one. The other belonged to someone else, a woman. The pattern didn't match any known offender in the database, but the shape of the handprint, the narrow spacing, the pressure, it looked deliberate, controlled. Someone had handled those photos carefully, not by accident. The investigation expanded overnight. The case that had started as a lone predator's secret was now hinting at something larger. Detective Dorsey requested every document from the diner's employment records, from maintenance contracts, from anyone who had worked with Feller during the summer of 1987. Most of the people were gone dead or scattered across the state. But one name stood out: Angela Crow, waitress, 24, at the time last known address in Clearwater. Angela had left town suddenly in the late 80s. She never filed taxes again, never renewed her driver's license. She simply disappeared. When Marissa pulled her personnel file, a note was stapled to the back. Quit without notice. Claimed family emergency. That same day, a retired patrol officer called the station. His name was Bill Harkins, 83. Now voice brittle from cigarettes and time. He said he remembered the night Lena went missing. He'd been the one to take the initial missing person report. He said something had bothered him ever since. There was this waitress, he told Marissa. She came to the station a few days later, said she'd seen Lena arguing with a man near the dumpster. Said she thought it was her boyfriend, but she didn't want to get involved. I wrote her name down, Angela something. Then the next day, she came back and told me to forget it. Said she'd made a mistake. He paused, breathing heavy. I think she was scared. Scared of what? Marissa tracked the phone records, the archives, the city directories. Angela Crow had vanished from the grid until a utility bill from 1996 popped up in Georgia under a new name, Ann Corwin. Same date of birth, same signature style. Marissa stared at the name, realizing she might be chasing the only living witness left, maybe more than that. She drove upstate the next morning, a 4-hour ride through swamps and empty highways. The address led her to a faded trailer park outside of Valdosta, Unit 12C. The screen door hung half open and the sound of an old radio crackled inside. When Marissa knocked, a frail woman in her 60s opened the door, eyes narrowing. Ann Corwin. No answer. I'm Detective Dorsey, Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I'm investigating the 1987 disappearance of Lena Cartwright. The woman froze. Her lips trembled. That was a long time ago. Yes, ma'am, but your name came up. The silence stretched thin. Then Anne or Angela stepped aside and let her in. The trailer smelled of dust and something burnt. On the wall were faded photographs of beaches, palm trees, and a younger woman in a diner uniform. I tried to forget her, Angela said finally, but she never left me. Her hands shook as she lit a cigarette. Lena was a sweet girl. Too sweet. Feller liked girls like that. Marissa leaned forward. You knew him. Angela nodded slowly. He fixed the fryer. Fixed everything. Always hung around after closing, said he was waiting for the manager. I didn't like him. He watched the girls too much. She took another drag. One night I saw Lena give him something, a piece of paper folded. He smiled. Then he grabbed her wrist. I yelled at him to back off. He did, but the way he looked at me, I knew he wasn't done. Marissa's pulse quickened. What was on that paper? Angela's eyes darted to the window. I don't know. But the next day, Lena didn't show up for work. That's when I knew he'd done something. I went to the police. I tried to tell them. But then I got a note in my locker. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a crumpled envelope yellow with age. Inside was a photo, a Polaroid of Angela herself taken from behind the diner, her back turned, unaware. On the bottom corner, scrawled in blue ink, "He's not done." Angela's voice cracked. I packed that night, left town, never looked back. Marissa stared at the photo. Same wallpaper pattern on the edges. Same blue pen. This handwriting, she whispered, it's the same as on Lena's bracelet. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I think she tried to warn me. The drive back to Clearwater felt endless. The air was thick with storm clouds, the kind that roll in from the Gulf with no warning. Marissa kept replaying Angela's story. The note, the photo, the woman's haunted eyes. If Lena had tried to warn someone, then maybe she hadn't been the only target. Maybe she'd found something bigger, something that connected Feller to others. At the station, she laid out every Polaroid side by side, victims, unknowns, backgrounds, the floral wallpaper repeated in every frame. But in 3 of them, the same 3 empty room photos, a tiny reflection appeared in the metal lampshade. It wasn't Feller. It was someone smaller. Shoulder-length hair, female. Marissa enhanced the image, the silhouette of a woman holding the camera, a woman who knew the room, who knew the angles, a woman who might still be alive. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. The storm rolled in hard and fast. She stared at the photos again, at the shadowed reflection staring back through decades. The 1987 cold case wasn't over. The monster they'd unmasked wasn't working alone. The storm that night felt biblical. Rain slammed against the glass of the Clearwater Police Department as lightning carved across the Gulf sky. Inside, Detective Marissa Dorsey stood over the evidence table, the hum of the fluorescent lights drowning out everything else. Dozens of Polaroids stared back at her like a silent audience from another time. 42 girls, 42 stories of fear frozen in film. But what mattered most weren't the faces, it was the reflection in that metal lamp. The faint outline of a woman, shoulder-length hair, a camera raised. Not Feller, someone else. She called the lab. Run facial mapping on that reflection, she said. I don't care if it's 2 pixels. Get me something. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the streets steaming under the Florida sun. The analysis came through before breakfast. The lab couldn't generate a clear match, but the proportions, the jawline, the hairline, the posture suggested a 70% likelihood it was female. Age range, late 20s to early 30s. And then the technician hesitated, lowering his voice. Detective, there's something else. That reflection, it's not from the 1980s. Marissa frowned. What do you mean? The Polaroid film batch used for those 3 photos was manufactured in 1991, 4 years after the others. Her stomach dropped. That meant someone else had the camera long after Lena's disappearance. Someone continuing Feller's ritual. Someone keeping it alive. She spread the photos apart, separating the older ones from the newer film stock. The wallpaper, the same chair, the same layout. The difference was subtle. The light source shifted slightly. The furniture aged, the edges of the floral print peeling deeper. Whoever took those later photos had returned to the same room years later. Feller was already dead by 2002, but the 1991 film, that meant he might not have acted alone, or that someone had picked up where he left off. Marissa drove to the ruins of the old workshop again, now sealed off with crime scene tape fluttering in the humid air. The building leaned against the swamp, half swallowed by vines. The silence inside was heavy, broken only by the buzz of flies. She crouched near the corner where the photos had been found. The floral wallpaper peeled under her gloved fingers, revealing something faint underneath markings, small lines etched into the wall rows of numbers like a countdown. Someone had carved dates. The earliest January 1987, the last August 1991. 7 names next to 7 dates. Only 2 of them had been identified among the victims in the photos. The rest were still unknown. When she brushed away the dirt at the bottom of the wall, a word appeared faint and desperate. He made me. Back at the lab, Marissa replayed Angela's testimony. The waitress who vanished the note in her locker, the photo that said he's not done. If the handwriting matched Lena's bracelet, that meant Lena and Angela had both seen something, maybe even confronted the same person. And if Feller had forced someone, maybe another woman, to help him, then Angela might not have been the only one who ran. She dug through every missing person file in the region between 1987 and 1992. There were hundreds, but one caught her eye. Tracy Morrow, 26, reported missing in 1991. Last known address, the same street as Feller's workshop. Tracy had been a freelance photographer. Her last job, a maintenance company contract shooting ID photos for staff records. The company Gulfside Repairs, owned by none other than Richard Feller. Marissa's pulse quickened. She looked again at the reflection in the Polaroid. Shoulder-length hair, slim build, photographer's stance. It wasn't proof, but it fit too perfectly to ignore. She drove out to meet Tracy's brother, who still lived in Tampa. His house smelled of old books and dust. Tracy, he said, voice, soft eyes, distant. She was the kind of person who wanted to fix broken things. Cameras people, it didn't matter. She said Feller was helping her with some photography gig. She trusted him. We never saw her again. Did the police ever find anything? He shook his head. They said she probably left town, but I knew better. The last photo she took was on that old Polaroid camera of hers. She always carried it. It was never found. Marissa felt the weight of it settle over her. Feller hadn't taken those last photos, Tracy had. But why? Out of fear, out of control, out of something worse. That night, she went back to the station and pulled every record of Feller's property ownership. One name kept reappearing on the lease forms and tax documents. Elaine Mercer, listed as emergency contact occupation bookkeeper. The handwriting on the tax forms, tight looping cursive, matched the writing on the back of the Polaroids. The same blue ink, the same rhythm of the letters. Elaine Mercer. She had vanished from the state records in 1993. No death certificate, no forwarding address. But her old post office box was still active, renewed yearly from an anonymous payment source in Clearwater. Marissa filed a trace request. 2 days later, surveillance footage from the post office arrived. A woman in her 70s, silver hair pulled into a bun, oversized sunglasses, collecting mail at 6:30 a.m., no one else in the building. The timestamp read April 2024, just 1 week before Lena's remains were found. It couldn't be coincidence. Marissa stared at the still frame until her eyes burned. If Elaine Mercer was alive, she was the only remaining thread between 1987 and now. But something gnawed at her. If the Polaroids had been found hidden in Feller's workshop, who placed them there? Who wanted them discovered after all this time? The next morning, she followed the trail to a small retirement complex outside Sarasota. The manager confirmed it. Yeah, we got a Miss Mercer here. Keeps to herself. Rents the last unit by the water. Doesn't talk much. Marissa parked outside, watching the unit through the windshield. The curtains were drawn, the blinds bent. For a long time, nothing moved. Then, at 4:17 p.m., the door opened. A frail woman stepped out, moving carefully with a cane. Same silver hair, same height as in the footage. She looked ordinary, unthreatening, until she turned slightly toward the light. A small scar ran across her cheek. Marissa approached slowly. "Miss Mercer." The woman stopped, her hand tightening on the cane. "I know why you're here," she said softly. Her voice carried something cold, practiced. "Then you know I have questions," Marissa replied. Mercer's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "You're too late. He's been dead for years." "I don't think that's the end of it." A pause. The old woman's eyes flicked to the horizon. "It never is." She turned and motioned toward the small porch. "You might as well come in." The house smelled of lavender and bleach. Everything was too clean, too symmetrical. On a shelf near the window sat a Polaroid camera, old but polished. I was his bookkeeper. She began sitting down slowly. At least that's what the paper said. In truth, I managed everything he couldn't keep straight: money, schedules, records. He trusted me, maybe more than he should have. Marissa sat across from her. "Did you know what he was doing?" A long silence. Then Mercer looked up, eyes sharp. "Of course I did. He made sure I did. You think I could work for that man and not see the stains, the lies, the fear. But you don't understand. He wasn't always in control." "What do you mean?" "He had someone helping him long before me. A girl, a photographer. She thought she was documenting repairs. She was documenting death." "Tracy Morrow," Marissa said. Mercer nodded slowly. "He broke her, made her believe she was part of something necessary. When she tried to leave, he made her take one last picture." "The empty room," Marissa whispered. Mercer's expression tightened. "He called it the silence. Said that room was where everything stopped. She died in it. I buried her myself. I knew the moment I did it, there'd never be enough bleach to clean what he made me touch." Marissa's throat felt dry, and after he died, Mercer's eyes darkened. "You think evil dies just because the body does. He wanted people to remember. He wanted someone to find them. That's why I left the Polaroids. It was the only way to end it." "End it?" Marissa asked quietly. "Or start it again?" The question hung in the air. Mercer looked away, her hand trembling slightly. "Some things never end, Detective. They just wait for someone else to open the box." Outside, the sun dipped low over the water, casting the room in bruised light. Marissa stood. "You'll need to come with me." Mercer didn't resist. She only said, "Check the walls beneath the paint. You haven't found them all." The words followed Marissa out the door, heavy as thunder. She drove back to Clearwater with the feeling that something vast and unfinished was unfolding. That the ghosts of 1987 were no longer trapped in old Polaroids. They were moving, whispering through time, rewriting the definition of what it meant to be solved. The interrogation room was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Elaine Mercer sat alone, her cane resting against the metal table, her hands folded neatly in front of her as if she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. Detective Marissa Dorsey stood behind the glass, watching through the one-way mirror. The old woman didn't look dangerous. She looked tired, fragile even, but her stillness carried a kind of gravity that made everyone else uneasy. The recording light blinked red. "State your name," the officer said softly. "Elaine Margaret Mercer," she replied. Her voice was steady, low, almost formal. "And do you understand that this interview is being recorded?" "I do. You're not the first to record me." Marissa stepped into the room. She closed the door quietly behind her and sat across from Mercer. "You said something before you were brought in," Marissa began. "You told me to check the walls. What did you mean?" Mercer looked up, eyes gray as ash. "There are names under the paint. He made me write them. Every girl. Every date. It was his way of keeping count." "Who is he, Elaine?" A long pause. "Then you think you know, but you don't." Marissa leaned forward. "Richard Feller killed Lena Cartwright. His DNA was on the photo. We found the oil drum, the remains." Mercer interrupted, her voice sharpening. "Feller wasn't the one who took her." The room froze. Marissa blinked. "Then who did?" Mercer's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. "He was there. But he wasn't alone. He never was." For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled distantly over the gulf. I didn't understand it at first, Mercer said, her voice growing thin as if the memories themselves were corroding her throat. He called her the little one. Said she reminded him of someone. He brought her into the shop that night. She wasn't scared, just confused. She thought he was helping her fix her bike chain. Then the door closed, and everything changed. Marissa's fingers tightened around her pen. You were there. Mercer nodded slowly. He made me stay. Said I had to see what he saw or I'd become her. He said it was about cleansing, about control, but the way he spoke like it was rehearsed, like he'd heard it from someone else. Someone else. Mercer's eyes flicked to the corner of the room, as if she could see the past projected there. A woman. He used to talk to her when he thought I wasn't listening. Said she was the one who showed him how to choose, the one who taught him to take pictures. He called her the teacher. Marissa's heart thudded once heavy. Do you know her name? I only heard it once. He said it when he was drunk. Angela. The air went still. Angela Crow, the waitress. The witness who had fled the state who'd given Marissa the old Polaroid with the words, "He's not done." No, Marissa murmured. That's not possible. Mercer gave a faint, bitter smile. You think she ran from him. I think she ran with him. The sound of rain against the window thickened. Every piece of the puzzle Marissa had built in her mind began to shift, rearranging itself into something she didn't want to see. She helped him lure the girls, Mercer continued. At first, I thought she was just another victim, but she stayed. He said she could talk anyone into anything. He said she made the first picture. Marissa's stomach turned. So Angela Crow wasn't his victim. She was his partner. Mercer looked down. For a while. Until she realized what he really wanted. Then she tried to leave. But by then it was too late. The pictures had already begun. Once you take the first one, you can't stop. Marissa felt the walls closing in. What happened to her? Mercer hesitated. He made me bury her too. The room went silent except for the storm. Marissa stood slowly, pushing the chair back. Where? Mercer's lips trembled. Behind the workshop, under the dogwood tree. There's another drum. She didn't wait. Within the hour, the dig team was back at the property, the ground soaked from the night's rain. The dogwood tree still stood twisted and pale roots snaking into the black soil. The radar hit metal again 2 feet deeper than the last drum. The excavation took 6 hours. When they opened it, there was no mistaking what they found. Human remains. Female. Around 30 years old. The teeth matched the dental records from Angela Crow's file. The shock hit Marissa like a physical blow. Angela had been dead for nearly 4 decades. So who had she spoken to in Georgia? Who had given her the Polaroid? Who had looked her in the eye and said, I tried to forget her? The woman she'd met wasn't Angela Crow. She called the Georgia Police Department to verify the fingerprints they'd taken at the trailer. The results came back within an hour. The prints belonged to Tracy Morrow, the photographer who had vanished in 1991. The dead woman had been alive all along. The woman believed Dead had been impersonating someone else. Marissa's chest went cold. Everything she thought she understood was unraveling. She returned to the holding cell, but Mercer was gone. The guard said she'd been transferred for medical observation, complained of dizziness. But when Marissa reached the infirmary, the bed was empty, the IV line hanging loose. The nurse swore she'd only turned her back for a minute. The security cameras showed Mercer walking calmly down the corridor, cane in hand, out the side door, disappearing into the rain. No one stopped her. An all-points bulletin went out statewide, but it was too late. Mercer had vanished again like smoke in the swamp air. That night, Marissa sat in her car outside the old diner lot, watching the neon of the new nail salon flicker against the puddles. Her reflection in the windshield looked older than it should have. She replayed Mercer's words. He wasn't the one who took her. The teacher. The missing Angela. The surviving Tracy. She opened the case file again. In the inventory list from the first crime scene, she saw something she hadn't noticed before: a second bracelet found near Lena's remains, smaller, tarnished. Inside, engraved initials, AC, Angela Crow's. Marissa turned the bracelet over and froze. Inside the metal band, etched so faintly it could only be seen under light, was a phrase. 3 words. He's not dead. Her breath caught. She checked the photo of Feller's autopsy record. The coroner's report from 2002, cause of death, myocardial infarction. Cremation ordered remains released to next of kin. Next of kin listed as E. Mercer. Elaine Mercer had been the one to claim the body. She could have swapped samples, faked the death hidden him. There had been no DNA confirmation, no standard testing in those days. If Feller wasn't dead, then who was buried in his place? She drove straight to the cemetery listed on the report headlights cutting through the fog. The caretaker led her to a small, unmarked grave behind a row of oak trees. The headstone read only Richard D. Feller, 1948 to 2002. Any record of exhumation requests, she asked. The caretaker shook his head. No, ma'am. But 2 months ago, a woman came by, asked to clean the grave, paid in cash. What did she look like? Older, silver hair, had a cane. Marissa's pulse pounded in her ears. Mercer. She fell to her knees, pressing her palm against the dirt. It was warm despite the rain, as if something beneath was breathing. She looked around. The grave sat lower than the others, soil uneven, disturbed recently. She called for a team. Within hours, they exhumed the coffin. When they pried open the lid, the smell hit like a punch. Inside was not a man. It was empty except for a Polaroid camera and a note sealed in plastic. The handwriting was neat, careful blue ink. You were right to look, but you'll never find him, because you're looking for a man, and he's not who you think. The words glowed under the flashlight beam. Marissa's hands shook. She turned the note over. On the back was a photo-new, undeveloped film just beginning to fade into shape. Her own car, her own silhouette, taken that morning. Somewhere out there, someone was still watching. And the 1987 cold case wasn't just resurfacing, it was starting all over again. The Clearwater station had never been so quiet. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder than breathing, and every fluorescent tube buzzed like a nervous thought. Agent Lucas Grant was the only one left inside. Files surrounded him, open, chaotic, alive. The walls that once told a linear story now looked like a fever dream. Strings of connections, faces, timelines, all bleeding into each other. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. Coffee had stopped working. Logic had stopped working. But one thing wouldn't leave his mind: the photo from the pier. The shadow watching him from behind. He'd analyzed it 20 times. No match, no heat signature, no explanation. The reflection on the wet boards showed something that shouldn't exist: 2 silhouettes where only he had been standing. He played the audio logs again. Marissa's last words, faint and distorted. Don't look at the negatives. He'd looked anyway, and now every image felt wrong. When he turned away, he could swear the photos shifted just slightly. Not violently, more like breathing. That morning, an envelope arrived at his desk with no return address. Inside, a single Polaroid, overexposed, the edges burned. The photo showed the interior of a small classroom. Empty desks, dust, an old projector frozen mid-frame. On the blackboard, written in chalk, 3 words. The teacher returns. Grant stared at it for a long time. He'd heard the name before, buried in Mercer's confession, the one who showed him how to choose. For weeks, he'd dismissed it as delusion. But now the handwriting matched the note from the grave. The teacher was real, or at least someone wanted him to believe she was. He traced the chalkboard in the photo, enlarging the grain until he saw a faint reflection in the glass of a cabinet. A face blurred and half-lit, watching from the back of the room. Female, smiling. He ran the photo through the lab. The film batch was dated 2024. That meant whoever sent it had taken the picture less than a month ago. By dusk, Grant was on the road. The photo's background had a logo faintly visible on a school poster, Pinellas Adult Learning Center. Closed since 1999, condemned after a hurricane. He parked outside the ruins, the windows boarded, the roof sagging. The air smelled of dust and salt. Inside, his flashlight beam caught old lesson charts curling on the walls. The word integrity peeled in half. A projector sat exactly where it had in the photo. He approached the chalkboard. The words "the teacher returns" had been wiped clean, but faint traces remained as if written recently. Something glinted beneath the chalk tray, another Polaroid. He turned it over carefully. The image was underdeveloped, but the outline was unmistakable. His own hand holding a flashlight. The timestamp 8:14 p.m. He looked at his watch. 8:14. Grant exhaled, forcing logic into panic. Someone was here, watching. He scanned the hall, no movement, no sound. Only the whisper of the wind through shattered windows. He tried the radio. Static. Then, faintly, a tape machine clicked somewhere deeper in the building. He followed the sound down the corridor, dust rising with each step. The door at the end stood slightly open, the light flickering inside. On the desk, an old reel-to-reel player spun slowly. A woman's voice filled the room, calm, measured like a teacher addressing her class. Lesson 1, it said. Observation defines truth. Once you're seen, you exist. Once you exist, you belong to the picture. Grant froze. Lesson 2. The voice continued. Every photographer leaves a reflection. Look close enough, and you'll see yourself becoming the subject. He leaned closer to the recorder. The voice shifted lower, now distorted. Lesson 3. Welcome to the class, Agent Grant. The tape stopped. He turned slowly toward the doorway, the flashlight trembling slightly. A reflection shimmered faintly on the window glass, not his. For a second, he thought he saw her, a woman's outline, hair to her shoulders, face obscured by a camera. Then the lights flickered out. The next thing he remembered was sunlight. He was sitting on the floor of the same room, the recorder still spinning empty reels. On the chalkboard, fresh words had been written in thick, deliberate strokes. Say cheese. He checked his phone, 6:47 a.m., 12 hours gone. The Polaroid from the desk was gone too. Back at headquarters, Grant didn't mention the missing time. He only filed his notes and quietly ordered every case connected to the teacher reopened under a new task force name, Operation Negative. He studied Lena Cartwright's last note again. He's not who you think. The words didn't feel like a warning anymore. They felt like instruction. He began comparing voice samples from every tape in evidence. One of them, labeled Crow Witness Statement 1987, had a background hiss identical to the one from the classroom tape. And beneath that hiss, a second voice, faint, almost imperceptible, whispered the same words at the same time, milliseconds apart, as if echoing from decades away. It was Mercer's voice. But it wasn't recorded in 1987. It was recorded recently. Grant sat back, realizing the horrifying symmetry. The teacher wasn't a single person, it was a cycle. Feller, Mercer, Tracy, now Marissa. Each had become the photographer in turn, each teaching the next through images left behind. The Polaroids weren't trophies, they were instructions. And now the camera was on his desk. He stared at it for a long time. He could destroy it and it break the chain. But curiosity was a contagion. He loaded new film just to see. Just once. The flash exploded white. For a moment the room went silent. Then the film slid out. Slowly, an image emerged, the station hallway empty except for a man sitting at a desk staring at a wall of Polaroids. Himself. And behind him, in the reflection of the window, a figure raising a camera. He dropped the photo. The picture fluttered to the floor, face down. He didn't look at it again. Outside, Clearwater woke under a pale sky, unaware that the case file labeled Florida 1987 Cold Case Solved had been quietly moved to a new drawer in the archive. The tab now read, Ongoing. And somewhere far from the noise of the city, another shutter clicked. By the time the sun pushed a pale ribbon across the gulf, the task force had a name, a room, and a rule. Don't look at the negatives. Agent Lucas Grant enforced it like a superstition he didn't believe in, but couldn't ignore. He moved the camera into a locked drawer, turned the key, and taped the key under his desk like a child hiding a talisman. The board on the wall changed again. Lena, Feller, Mercer, Tracy, Marissa, and then a fifth column labeled simply, The Teacher. He started in the basement where old cases go to mold. Metal shelves, cardboard boxes, evidence logs written by hands that have long since retired. He requested microfilm reels from newspapers that no longer exist, called librarians who spoke in the slow, careful tone reserved for people digging up things best left quiet. In every decade, he looked for the same shape, a disappearance that pulled a town inside out, a photo that surfaced years later, like a message in a bottle, an investigator who didn't sleep after that. The pattern rose like tide marks. 1979, St. Augustine, a girl vanished near a bait shop. A trooper found Polaroids in a cooler. The trooper requested a transfer and never took another case. 1993, Mobile, a motel fire with no source. A camera recovered intact. The reporting detective quit the force, moved inland, wrote unsent letters to someone he called ma'am. 2006, Athens, Georgia. A storage unit auction turned evidence locker, 33 photographs of empty rooms. The campus PD corporal who cataloged them took a leave of absence and never returned. Each town kept its porch light on for a while. Each town learned how to sleep with it on. He pinned a map. A thin silver thread tied the Gulf Coast to the Carolinas, then curved down again like a looped signature returning to Florida as if the whole country were the inside of a camera light, finding the same emulsion again and again. When he drew a line through the dates, they fell into sequence, one case reignited within 2 years of another investigator stepping in. Not suspects, not victims, witnesses. Every picture needs a witness. Grant cross-checked training rosters and conference attendance sheets, the dull paperwork of law enforcement that outlives everything else. He found a more unnerving overlap at each location within 6 months of a case going cold, or resurfacing. A visiting lecturer had given a seminar on evidence photography to local agencies. Different names on the sign-in sheets, different institutions sponsoring it. But the slides, when he tracked them down, recycled images with the same odd detail, mirrors and doorknobs, and glass, always a diagram explaining the importance of reflections. The file names changed. The author credit did not. It read, T. Morrow Adjunct. Tracy Morrow, presumed dead in 1991, had been lecturing for 2 decades without a payroll, a W-2, or even a photo ID. Only itineraries, syllabi, and a PO box that always rolled over to another city once the seminar ended. Every invoice was paid in money orders. Every flyer referenced a college that later swore the workshop never happened. A traveling class where only the handouts remained. He brought the packet to the lab and asked them to scan the margins. Under UV, faint impressions bloomed. Page after page had been written over other pages, the ghost of earlier sentences pressing up through the paper like a palimpsest. A repeating line pulsed under the text, observation defines truth, the same sentence that had greeted him on the tape in the classroom. Late afternoon, the room airless, he called the number printed on the oldest flyer, disconnected of course. But the area code matched a defunct adult learning program headquartered in a county building off US 90. The archive clerk answered on the 3rd ring, told him she'd checked the storage cage, came back breathless. We still have an intake ledger, she said. Names, dates, visiting instructors. It's handwritten. Careful script. No first names, only last initial and a title. M. Teacher. What years, he asked. All of them, she said, from 1986 to 2001. He drove the ledger back himself. The book felt wrong in his hands, too warm, as if it had been waiting. The pages smelled faintly of bleach and school chalk. The entries began tidy and grew cramped and looping across the years like someone writing while a train moved under the desk. In the margin of 1987, 2 weeks before Lena vanished, someone had drawn a tiny rectangle with a circle in the middle, a camera in a child's shorthand, or a door with an eye. He photocopied the page and pinned it over the map. The room responded like a lung drawing air. The thread across states tightened. The dates aligned with lectures, and the lectures aligned with the renewal of cold cases, and those aligned with a single repeating event. A community open house at whichever building hosted the class motel meeting rooms, adult schools, church basements, free refreshments, bring your photographs, learn to see. Grant sat back and let his eyes blur, a trick he'd learned when facts refused to speak plainly. When the edges softened, the board changed. The faces became blank chips of glare. The rooms became frames within frames. The lines between red pins became paths worn by something pacing, restless, patient. He wrote one sentence at the center to anchor it. The teacher does not arrive. The teacher is invited. He asked the task force to pull every sign-in sheet from every open house, every RSVP card, every feedback form. They scanned the handwriting. 2 samples recurred disguised by different pens and inconsistent slant, but always with the same pressure on the downstroke of the T, the same closed loop on the E. The first matched Mercer. The second didn't match any file they had, not Feller, not Tracy, not Marissa. The second sample signed a different name each year, Beth Claire R.E.M., sometimes only host. In one northern county, it wrote parent. In Clearwater, it wrote nothing at all. It simply drew a small rectangle with a circle in the middle. Night came on with that flat Florida suddenness, one layer of light peeled off the world. He sat alone with the board until silence stopped sounding like quiet and started sounding like breath on glass. He took the key from under his desk and opened the drawer. The camera waited square and dumb as a locked door. He told himself he was taking inventory, making sure it hadn't been swapped counting film. He told himself it was only procedure. He didn't notice the envelope beneath it until it brushed his knuckles. No postmark, no name. Inside, one photo already developed. The station hallway, same angle as the last one he'd taken, but older, somehow grainier, harsher flash. At the far end of the corridor, a bulletin board that no longer exists, and pinned to it a flyer, Community Open, House Evidence Photography for Neighborhood Watch. Date, June 12, 1987. The venue, a church 2 blocks from the diner where Lena worked. On the back of the photo, in neat blue ink, bring what you've seen. Leave what you don't want to carry. He checked the case log. A church volunteer had reported a box of lost and found pictures left after the open house dog photos, family parties, blurry sunsets, but the box never made it to property. It went to the church office, was logged for community return, then vanished into a move. He called the current pastor, who was younger than the file. The pastor sounded apologetic and thrilled to have something to help with. "We still have old office boxes in the bell tower," he said. "They're not cataloged. You're welcome to look." The ladder up felt like climbing into a throat. Dust drifted in cones through the slats bells above like sleeping animals. He found the boxes stacked in an alcove, labels curling tape fossilized. It took an hour to find the right one, and when he cut the brittle tape, the smell of old paper and church wax bloomed out like a remembered hymn. Inside were photographs in rubber bands, a dozen, at least, maybe more. People smiling, dogs, mid-leap a birthday cake, collapsing sunsets, the everyday tenderness that lives in a rectangle. And then the stack shifted and the ordinary surrendered to something else. There were rooms, always rooms. Chairs posed under light. Mirrors angled to take in doors. Doorknobs catching the smallest crescents of faces that weren't in the frame. The floral wallpaper again. Then another print in a different motel. Then a drywall seam in a church classroom where a board had once hung. In the middle, he found a Polaroid of the diner's back door. It was shut. The push bar caught a sliver of sky. In the bottom right corner, a girl's reflection ghosted in the little window. Only her braid visible, a ribbon at the tip, the kind that says 17 without needing to. On the back, the same firm script as the ledger practice shot. Subject will be missed. Initials M. He didn't say the name. The bell above him moved a fraction and then held metal whispering to metal. He put every room photo in a separate evidence sleeve and slid them into a bag with hands he tried to keep steady. When he climbed down, the church was empty, the echo of his steps sounding like 2 sets of feet. Back at the task force room, he laid the rooms out in sequence across the floor. The angles matured. The flash softened, then sharpened. The reflections learned where to stand and how to vanish. Early frames exposed the camera holder by accident. Later frames hid her entirely. And in 3, the reflection showed a second photographer standing just behind the first, a longer shadow, a taller posture, a shoulder that could be any man's, or none at all. Beside those 3, he wrote the only thing that felt true to teachers. He remembered the reel-to-reel voice, "Welcome to the class." He understood suddenly that classes end. Schools do not. A class is a moment. A school is a structure you carry. The teacher wasn't a person. The teacher was an office like lead detective or custodian inhabited by whoever learned the rules well enough to speak them into a room. He went looking for the school's origin. He found a flood report. In a brown-edged folder at the county building, high shelves volunteer historian, the particular silence of civic ruin, there was a binder from a storm season that broke half the coast. A list of properties condemned after saltwater drowned their wiring. On page 32, a modest line item, Adult Learning Annex Building B Photography Classroom, walls, unstable mirrors removed for safety. The address was 3 blocks from the diner. The timestamp was 3 weeks before Lena disappeared. Paper clipped to the page, a work order signed by R. Feller for minor repair and removal of interior fixtures. Another signature beneath it in a hand he recognized now, without proof, E. Mercer. There it was, quiet as rust, a room with mirrors removed for safety. A maintenance order that put 2 people inside after hours, an empty building that lived on as a set. He closed his eyes and pictured a chair under a heat-scarred lamp, a wall where a chalkboard once hung fresh paint trying and failing to cover a lesson that wouldn't fade. He pictured a girl with a bracelet hiding a note inside it. He pictured someone practicing on doors on glass on faces that weren't yet framed. When he opened his eyes, the room around him had changed in the smallest way. The board of faces, the map, the thread, everything had inched a half degree toward the window. He would have sworn it. He steadied his breath and reached for the camera and told himself what he always told himself. This is evidence management. This is chain of custody. This is a lock and a key and a drawer and a rule. He didn't take a picture. He closed the drawer, pressed the key against the tape until it bit his skin, and walked to the window. Outside, Clearwater turned its porch lights on one by one, a necklace along the waterline. He saw his reflection in the glass, and behind it the faintest suggestion of a second figure just beyond the reach of certainty. Every picture needs a witness, he said to the empty room, and heard the room answer in its own way. The soft, almost polite click of something small resetting itself to 0, ready for the next exposure. The task force room learned how to breathe without him. When Agent Lucas Grant stepped out for coffee, it exhaled. When he returned, it inhaled and held. He started noticing small displacements the way sailors notice wind shifts. Pins nudged a hair tape corners, lifting a photograph turned 5 degrees like a head tilting toward a voice. He wrote the changes down at first, then stopped. The record made the room feel seen, and when the room felt seen, it performed. The church box yielded 2 more clues after a long afternoon of not blinking. One was nothing, and therefore everything, a scrap of blue ribbon trapped under old Scotch tape on the bottom of the carton, the curl of it holding the ghost of a knot. The other was a folded handout from a long-ago open house, the ink bleeding in the way church photocopiers always bled. Witness night was printed across the top, in heavy type, then under it smaller and gentler. Bring a photograph that will not leave you alone. We will teach you how to ask it to speak. He pinned the handout between Lena's school picture and the map thread that looped from coast to coast. The arc tightened again. He could feel his thinking move from names to functions. Victim, perpetrator, accomplice, those nouns had turned slippery. New roles had taken their place. Teacher, witness, subject, photographer, and a fourth that appeared whenever he stared too long into the glass of an evidence sleeve auditor. The person who checks if the picture is lying and in doing so teaches it how to lie better next time. Near evening, the lobby guard called up to say there was mail for him without postage left on the counter by a woman who didn't wait. The envelope was the color of old teeth. Inside, a RSVP card filled in neat block letters, "Yes, I will attend witness night." In the corner, a printed line, signature of attendee already signed with his name in his own hand. Grant took the stairs 2 at a time back to the board. He placed the card beneath the handout, then stepped back and let the pattern present itself. No abductor to chase, no ransom call, no manifesto. just invitations placed like seeds in offices and churches until someone like him watered them with attention. He had not been dragged inside anything. He had opened a door, flicked on a light, and the room had gladly rearranged itself around the light source. He called the captain, asked for a small team with steady nerves and no camera habits, no social media, no hobbyists, people who were good at looking and better at looking away. He laid out a plan that sounded less like a raid and more like a lesson plan. Control, the light control, the angles neuter, the mirrors flood the space with continuous exposure until flash became pointless. No one brings a phone. No one wears a badge outward. No names spoken to strangers. If someone asks to see what you've brought, you show an empty folder and tell the truth. You brought nothing you are willing to carry home. The venue, if the card could be trusted, was the condemned Adult Learning Annex Building B, the one whose flood report mentioned mirrors removed for safety. Someone had taped a paper on the chain link gate when he arrived. Community Event Room 3. It fluttered, without wind. The hallway carried a clean smell beneath the mildew, as though the place had been recently washed with a bucket at arm's length. He had 2 officers inside already in plain clothes stationed to be visible, without seeming like they were standing guard. Another pair covered the lot. Grant walked in with a clipboard and an air of being late. Room 3 held 12 metal chairs, a folding table with a coffee urn that looked like it remembered percolating, and a projector on a cart with a cable looping nowhere. On the far wall, a chalkboard waited with a dry eraser placed like a promise. Welcome, witnesses, had been written in an accessible hand. Beneath it, please place your photographs face down on the table. No one had placed anything yet. That felt worse than if the table had been full. People came as they do a man with worry in his shoulders. A woman doing the math of leaving before she had to speak a pair of retirees who would have come to any free thing labeled community. 2 teenagers curious enough to dare boredom. Grant greeted them as if he were not counting heads against exits. He looked for cameras, saw none, felt tricked by that. At 7:05, a figure arrived who changed the air. Not by taking the front of the room, she did not. She slipped in and sat halfway back, hands folded, eyes taking in corners. Silver hair, face unhidden. Not Mercer. He knew that now the way you know a song is not another song after the first bar. Older than the woman from the pier, younger than Mercer, built from the same posture of attention that photographs teach. She looked at the chalkboard and smiled as if at a private joke she was finally allowed to hear told out loud. When the wall clock stuttered to 7:10, the projector coughed to life on its own. Across the chalkboard, a slide appeared. Lesson 1, Observation Defines Truth. The room received the sentence the way parched ground receives a first dark spot from sudden rain, eager but wary. No one claimed the projector. No one moved to turn it off. The slide advanced. Lesson 2, Reflections are evidence of the frame. The coffee urn clicked once. The old fluorescent in the ceiling committed to its hum. Grant spoke as if he were the facilitator. It felt less like a lie than it should have. "We'll keep it simple," he said. "No pictures unless you want to share. No names. If something asks to be left in this room, we leave it." He watched the silver-haired woman watching him. She didn't nod. That somehow felt like assent. A hand rose one of the retirees, cheeks pink with nerves. She placed a landscape on the table, face up, despite the board's instructions, a cove at sunset water, holding light like a careful tray. "My husband took it," she said. "He said it never looked like that again." The projector advanced, without being touched. Lesson 3. A picture repeats itself by teaching how to be taken. The sentence moved through the room like a thread through cloth. The silver-haired woman's hands stayed still. Grant asked if anyone else had brought something. The teenagers produced a print of a birthday party in a kitchen rapture on a child's face. The man with worry in his shoulders kept his envelope shut, shook his head no when invited. The woman doing the math finally set down a Polaroid with 2 fingers as if setting down a live thing. It was an empty room. Chair under a lamp, chalkboard blank. Grant did not look at the corners. He felt the urge to look at the corners like thirst. The projector obediently offered the next line, Lesson 4, Trade Places. He walked to the chalkboard. The eraser left clean lines where the projector's glow slid around the strokes. He wrote under the lessons, his hand steadier than his chest. Counter lesson, a flood. The frame with light. He plugged a portable work lamp into his extension cords. 4 of them, splitters daisy-chained into an overabundance of normalcy, and brought the bulb up until the room had no shadows deep enough for a figure to stand in. The empty chair in the Polaroid on the table looked smaller under so much light. The projector flickered once and gave him back his own rule duplicated on a new slide. The silver-haired woman finally moved. She reached toward the coffee urn, used it as a mirror to fix a flyaway hair, with a gesture too elegant for such a room. In the curved steel, Grant saw the whole space-inverted attendee's table chalkboard. His own face widened by the convexity, and behind him, nearer than behind, should be the faintest suggestion of a second him out of phase by less than a breath. He did not turn. He lifted the work lamp higher, bathing the back wall, until the coffee urn offered him only white. When he spoke again, his voice remembered training instead of fear. Since no host has announced themselves, I'll offer a thought, and then we'll go pictures that do not leave you alone or asking for a witness. Not a photographer. A witness. The role is not the same. The silver-haired woman regarded him the way teachers regard a student who answered a trick correctly without knowing why, and if the witness is the one that teaches, she asked. Her voice had the timbre you expect from instructions printed cleanly, not Mercer's register, a cousin to it. Then the picture is already finished, he said, surprising himself with how quickly the sentence arrived. It doesn't need to be taken again. She smiled without showing teeth. And yet here we are. The projector clicked to a final slide as if embarrassed to have run out homework. Bring what you've seen. Leave what you won't carry. The retirees stood grateful for an ending. The teenagers left with the velocity of those who can. The worried man took his unopened envelope home, which felt like a victory. The woman doing math asked whether the room would be open tomorrow. Grant told her no and meant it. When the last civilian left, the silver-haired woman remained seated, palms open on her knees, neither threat nor comfort. The plainclothes officers materialized in the doorway without announcing themselves. She glanced at them with the same mild interest one gives to museum guards who appear when you lean too close to a painting. Tracy Morrow, Grant asked at last, not as accusation as hypothesis said aloud to see whether it changed the temperature. She did not give him the satisfaction of a flinch. Names belong to subjects, she said. I prefer roles. Teacher, then. Only when someone enrolls. He nodded toward the chalkboard. Unenroll me. That's not for me to do. Her gaze shifted to the drawer where the task force camera did not reside because he was not foolish enough to bring it. Students dropped the class by choosing not to pass it on. I haven't passed anything on. You brought light, she said almost kindly. You wrote a counter lesson. That's a lesson too. His officers stepped in not so much to arrest as to claim the space with new physics. She rose with the effortlessness of a person who spends all day sitting still. No wrist was offered for a cuff. No chase was invited. In the coffee urn, Grant's reflection overlapped hers until their faces combined into something that looked like neither. He did not like what the composite looked like. He tipped the urn, spilling its reflection into a harmless shine on the floor. Where is Detective Dorsey? He asked. He kept his voice a steady rail for the answer to travel on. Between frames, she said. Where you were last night. I don't lose time. You loan it, she corrected. You'll want it back soon. He gestured to the officers. They moved with gentle precision. She allowed the escort head high, no fear on the surface of her. In the threshold, she paused, and for the first and only time met the glass of the door head-on, letting it catch her directly. In the reflection, a third figure stood behind her shoulder like a suggestion of a taller self. When the door closed, the figure did not vanish. It simply became the hallway. The annex emptied the way stage sets empty, fast, as if a curtain had fallen without applause. Grant unplugged the projector-coiled cords with hands that felt a half-second behind. He wiped the chalkboard clean of everyone's sentences, including his own. The eraser left a gray cloud on the tray that would have shown fingerprints if anyone had pressed too hard. No one had. In the lot, he watched the unmarked car carrying her drift toward the road and felt the tug of the old habit follow, interrogate, demand a name that fits a face. He let the car go. They would process her record, make her belong to paperwork for a while. Roles slip on paper. That was fine. He had something else to do. Back in the task force room, he didn't turn the lights on. He went to the window and let the city's porch lights fill the glass so he could check the overlap him on the inside the waterline, outside the faint ghost at his shoulder. It was present at the edge of vision, patient, not menacing so much as inevitable. He took out a legal pad and wrote a new rule, set by hand, each line like a rung on something he could climb. No unsupervised glass in evidence spaces. Continuous light in interview rooms. No flash allowed. No shares. We listen. We don't look. Destroy the unassigned cameras. He underlined this twice. Witnesses are not photographers. If you begin to narrate the frame, you're out. He taped the rules to the inside of the drawer where the camera used to be. He didn't check whether the drawer had moved. He didn't want to teach it. When he finally spoke aloud for the benefit of the empty room or the listening that passes for company, he said the sentence that had remade the entire board in his head. He's not who you think, he repeated and let the pronouns decay. Not he, not who, not you, not think. Pronouns and verbs, the most slippery things we trust. The phone on the wall rang once and stopped, a polite reminder that access goes both ways. In the hallway, footsteps approached, 2 sets, then only 1. Then the air closing after them. He held still until stillness became honest again. On his desk, something he hadn't placed waited, an index card hand-lettered in blue. Lesson 5, decide what you refuse to teach. He turned the card over. Blank, mercifully blank. Grant slid it into a sleeve, labeled it with the date, and filed it under a new tab that did not say solved or ongoing or cold. The tab said policy. He was not comfortable with the word. That was the point. Outside, heat lightning stitched the horizon without thunder. Somewhere very near, a shutter clicked. Somewhere even nearer, it did not. He let both possibilities exist without choosing the louder one. The board behind him did not move. Or if it did, it learned how to do it in ways that honored his rule number 3. He went home without looking into the dark panes of the station doors. At his apartment, he left the blinds up and the lamps on. He slept an hour, then another. When he woke, the porch light from across the street had found his ceiling and drawn a perfect square he could lie under, like a frame not yet claimed by a photograph. Morning would bring paperwork that believed in nouns again. For the night, verbs would be enough. He would continue, resist, erase, refuse, witness. And somewhere in a room that had no mirrors because it needed none, a chalkboard waited clean for whatever sentence he would write on it next. The interview room looked different under continuous light. No shadows pooled in the corners. No glass offered a second opinion. Agent Lucas Grant stood where the camera used to sit and let the bare bulb do what it was built to do, flatten the world into one layer of fact. Across the table, the silver-haired woman rested her palms on a paper placemat the techs had slid there to bleed off fingerprints into fiber. She wasn't cuffed. She didn't need to be. She wore stillness like a uniform. He didn't start with her name. He started with the rule he'd written on his legal pad and taped inside the drawer. Witnesses are not photographers, he said, as if reading a weather report. If you begin to narrate the frame, you're out. She smiled a centimeter. Then don't ask me to narrate. I'm not, he said. I'm asking you to point. At what? At whatever you won't carry home. Her eyes moved to the ceiling, not as evasion, but as measure. The bulb hummed. Somewhere beyond the cinder block, printers chattered like rain. You think this is about light, she said. It's about permission. Who gave you yours? That's not the first question, she said, and for a moment she sounded like a teacher explaining the order of operations to a room of tired students. The first question is who gave you yours? Lena Cartwright, he said before he could choose a safer noun. She didn't consent to any of this. Nor did you, she said softly. Consent arrives disguised as curiosity, then it hangs its coat and stays. He let the sentence cross the table and fall between them without catching it. Where is Detective Dorsey? Between frames. Define that. Not here. Not gone, she said. In the classroom, you visited the clock, lost 12 hours. That isn't time passing. That's time deciding which picture it belongs to. Then choose, he said. Choose this picture. I don't choose, she said. I teach. Choice is your elective. He glanced at the mirror that wasn't there. Habit. He caught himself and looked instead at the bulb's uncomplicated glare at the tabletop's laminate pretending to be wood. Tell me where you learned, he said. Start there. Adult Learning Annex Building B. A flicker, the smallest acknowledgement. Rooms teach better than people, she said. People leave. Rooms remember. Who set the room? Maintenance, she said. They know where the doors really are. Our feller E. Mercer. Names again, she chided gently. Roles are truer. They arranged the furniture, others arranged the schedule. I taught the one thing no one writes down, which is how to turn looking into belonging. He flattened his hand over the placemat to keep from tapping the pen that wasn't in it. We're past your riddles, he said, though he knew the statement was a wish. If you were a guest lecturer, where are your rosters? Where's your payroll? Why do your sign-in sheets change hands after every open house? She folded her fingers, an officiant preparing to bless something no one had asked for. A school without a registrar never closes, she murmured. That's the design. Then we will register it, he said. Tonight. She tilted her head, by arresting a roll, by ending a class. Classes end, she agreed. Schools go on. He could feel the interview falling into the groove her words cut and forced his voice sideways. If the room teaches, then the room can be untaught. We removed mirrors. We flooded light. We forbade flash. You also invited a witness night, she said with the smallest warmth, like a parent impressed that a child had built something functional from scrap. You stood in the front of the room, to keep someone else from doing it, to show them how she corrected not unkindly. He reached for the simplest lever. Where is Marissa? Listening, she said, to what the pictures say when you stop taking them. He stood. The chair legs made no scrape in the bright room. Rubber feet had learned civility. He opened the door, let the hallway's ordinary noise reset his balance, then returned and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. His new policy set plain ink, no letterhead. Read it, he said. She did. Line by line, no unsupervised glass, continuous light, no shares. Destroy unassigned cameras. Witnesses are not photographers. When she finished, she placed her hand over the margins as if warming the ink. You've done something rare, she said. You've chosen what you refuse to teach. Good, he said. Now teach me the one thing I'm missing. She met his eyes then, fully, and the room did not tilt. You keep searching the frame for a person, she said. Search for an arrangement instead. He left her with a sandwich and water and walked to the task force room that had learned to breathe. The board waited. The map's loop around the Gulf glinted under the track lights. He took down the pins, not angrily, carefully, as if unhooking wires from a sleeping machine. He replaced red thread with masking tape laid in clean rectangles around clusters of evidence rooms, schedules, fixtures, invitations. He left people for last and circled it once, not as a center, but as a margin annotation. When he stepped back, the pattern changed its verb, not hunted, not stalked, not pursued, arranged. He radioed facilities. I need work orders from 1986 to 1992 for county buildings, anything with interior fixtures removed. Mirrors, chalkboards over heads. I want signatures, duplicates, corrections, voids the pile you don't scan because the paper jams. The printer room coughed out its archives like an old dog bringing newspapers. Damp edges, carbon sheets, triplicate stutter. He spread them across the floor. The signatures staggered through time, R. Feller's blocky utility, E. Mercer's tidy loops, and then a third hand, neat as ledger math, signing T. Morrow, not as photographer, but as custodial consultant. He placed the three names under fixtures and took a breath that filled more of his ribs than the last one had. He called records for the permit histories of every community open house. Many were filed as Safety Orientation Neighborhood Watch, Refresh Senior Photo Club exhibition labels no one audits. The dates drifted toward anniversaries 2 weeks after a disappearance 1 year, after a discovery a Thursday before a holiday. Predictable enough to be invisible. Arrangement, he said to the empty room, and the room in its new habit of good faith did not answer with a click. At 2:13 a.m., the lobby guard buzzed him. "There's someone here to see you," the guard said, voice lowered by instinct. "No appointment. Says she was told to come." Grant asked the simplest questions. No, she wasn't carrying a camera. Yes, she had something in an envelope. Yes, she looked like she'd been missing sleep since the Reagan administration. He met her halfway down the corridor to keep the task force room's door shut. She held the envelope like a fragile animal. "I never came forward," she said, words lined with a lifetime of explaining that fact to herself. "I was a student teacher in '87, the Adult Learning Annex, night class. They told us to bring a picture that wouldn't leave us alone." She opened the envelope. 2 Polaroids, the black edges worn to brown. In the first, a hallway with bulletin boards, the word integrity peeling. In the second, a chair under a lamp chalkboard erased to gray. In the lower corner of both the round glint of a doorknob and a sliver of face captured by accident. The sliver could be anyone until you knew too much. "Why now?" he asked. "Because your postcard came," she said. He stiffened. "We didn't send one." "Somebody did." She pulled a note from the envelope, blue ink, neat, the same block letters as the RSVP card witness night. "Decide what you refuse to teach." No date, no location. Only his policy line returned to him like a coin. He walked her to an interview room with light like day, and no glass thanked her more times than protocol required. Scanned the Polaroids into a system that didn't like being fed rectangles it couldn't command. When she left, she took her pictures back. She left the note on the table, palms pressing gratitude into the paper. Between 4 and 5, the city made that sound only Florida cities know, the hush that precedes birds deciding the day can't be argued with any longer. He used the hush to draft a second sheet for the drawer. Procedure for rooms. Step 1, inventory fixtures. Step 2, remove reflective control points. Step 3, floodlight. Step 4, cancel any event that calls itself witness night. Step 5, if a room insists on teaching, close it like a mouth door off its hinges, chalkboard, taken down chairs stored elsewhere. Step 6, write down what it tried to say and file it under policy, not evidence. By 8, he had signatures from a deputy chief and a county council who wanted to be on the right side of a headline that hadn't been written yet. He carried copies to interview too. The silver-haired woman read them with the same calm she'd given the first sheet. "You're engineering a famine," she said. For what he asked. "For the appetite that keeps this alive," she said. "You'll still have cameras in the world, Agent. You'll still have rooms. But if no one is hungry to teach, the school goes dark. Temporarily." "Temporarily is a blessing," he said. She tapped the lines with a fingertip, thoughtful, almost proud. "There will be invitations," she warned. "They'll come dressed as forms you trust. Surveys, RSVPs, sign-ins. You'll want to write your name because you were raised to be polite." "I'll write my policy instead," he said. "Good," she said softly. "Now you're teaching." He stood because ending the conversation kindly was part of this new class. "One more thing," he said. "If rooms remember, where did the first lesson begin?" She answered without pause. "In a room with a mirror someone put up only to make the room bigger." "That is where this always begins," she said. "Someone wanting more room than they have." He walked her back to holding with the decency he wanted the building to learn by repetition. Then he returned to the board and replaced people with appetites. Under appetites, he wrote 4 words: more room, more light. He drew a box around them and for the first time in months felt the board relax like a knot acknowledging the shape of the rope that made it. The phone on the wall rang twice. He let it. It rang again the 3rd time, not insistent, just present. He answered. A voice that could have been his if it had grown up somewhere quieter said, "You're late for class." "Then I'm dropping it," he replied. "Students don't drop the voice recited. Teachers do." "Then drop," he said, and hung up before the line could turn the sentence into a test. He took his key from under the desk and opened the drawer, not to touch the camera. It wasn't there anymore, because he had already obeyed his own rule, but to add the second sheet to the first. On impulse, he slid a blank card in too. At the top he wrote, Lesson 6 reserved. He didn't know yet what belonged there. He liked not knowing. When he stepped to the window, the glass gave him what it had given for days, his face the waterline, the distant lift of gulls, nothing else. No second self waited at his shoulder. No taller shape borrowed the hallway. The room exhaled. He let it. On his desk, a new envelope lay where there had been none. But he did not startle. He opened it and found a single photo printed on paper stock, not instant film. A classroom chalkboard, erased chairs stacked. No lamp. No chair in the center. At the bottom, typed a sentence, Class canceled, see office for policy. On the back, in blue ink, he now knew as well as his own a postscript, between frames is just a hallway. Walk it with the lights on. He filed the photo under policy and wrote himself a to-do list that looked less like hunting and more like maintenance. Hold the annex for demolition review. Notify churches of new guidelines for open houses. Publish a bulletin that sounded boring on purpose. Rewrite intake forms without signature lines that beg a name to become a role. He added one non-administrative line at the bottom, find Marissa. He underlined it once, not because he didn't believe in it, but because belief didn't need underlining. When the day rolled fully upright, he brought the silver-haired woman a second sandwich. She accepted it like communion. What will you call this? She asked, nodding toward the policy sheets. Maintenance, he said. Good class? She said, the compliment small and clean as a folded towel. He left the door open when he walked away so the continuous light from the hall could spill in without asking. In the task force room, he switched off the track lights and watched the fluorescents hum their ordinary song. The board did not move. The room did not perform. Somewhere else a shutter might have clicked. Somewhere nearer, it didn't matter. He picked up the phone, dialed facilities, and scheduled the removal of a chalkboard in a building that had taught more than it had a right to. On the line, a maintenance supervisor coughed, cleared his throat, and asked for a work order number. Grant gave him one that was real. The man wrote it down with a pen that squeaked. We'll bring 2 people, the supervisor said. Good practice to have a witness. Grant smiled without showing teeth. Bring 3, he said. Make it boring. The day held. The lights stayed on. And somewhere between frames that were learning how not to recruit, Detective Marissa Dorsey turned her head toward a door she could finally see because someone kept it open long enough for the hallway to be a hallway and not a lesson. The day they took down the chalkboard, nothing dramatic happened. No wind shift, no lights popping, no camera shuddering from a hand that wasn't there. 2 facilities men unbolted the slate, eased it into a padded cradle, and carried it out sideways like a stretcher, the kind of movement that makes buildings seem human. Agent Lucas Grant signed for the transfer and watched their truck merge into traffic, a perfectly boring end to a room that had insisted on being important for too long. He stood in the doorway of the Adult Learning Annex Building B Room 3 and let the empty wall breathe. White primer where the board had been. Dust line like a healed scar. The new policy maintenance had traveled faster than rumor. Churches replaced silver urns with paper cups. Community centers switched open houses to daylight hours only. The county purchasing office returned a shipment of instant cameras with a polite note and a copy of the bulletin attached. We appreciate your donation, it read, but our programming does not require these items at this time. The sentence wore its dullness like armor. It worked. Grant carried routine like a lantern. Interview rooms ran bright and continuous. Evidence spaces lost their glass. The task force board became a workbook, rectangles of tape labeled rooms, schedules, fixtures, invitations. Appetites filled with dates and addresses and phone numbers that connected to actual people who cursed at hold music and asked for permits. The board offended no one. It didn't perform. The room learned to be a room. At noon on a Thursday that felt like any other, the lobby guard buzzed him with a voice that had relearned casual. "You've got someone here," the guard said. "No appointment. Says she's returning a book." He sounded amused by the phrase, which meant he didn't feel threatened by it. Grant walked downstairs expecting a citizen with a pamphlet. He found Detective Marissa Dorsey instead alive. Thinner eyes, clear in the way that follows illness or decision. She wore ordinary clothes. She carried no camera. In her hand, a binder from the annex, the county seal stamped into cardboard gone soft with water and years. For a long moment, neither of them said what they had rehearsed in separate rooms. Then she handed him the binder, exactly as someone returns a library book, one day late but spotless. Property of Adult Learning Annex Photography. The cover read, "Inside sign-in sheets with names that belonged to people who had since moved, died, or learned to keep porch lights on without hoping they signaled anything." At the back, tucked in like a receipt, a syllabus typed on a manual machine, "Observation and belonging." No instructor listed, no room number. Under objectives, to decide together what we refuse to teach. Grant didn't ask where she'd been. Between frames was enough. He walked her upstairs to a room that kept its lights honest and slid water across the table. She drank without shaking. "Did you follow the hallway?" he asked at last, surprised by the gentleness of his own voice. "I didn't run," she said. "That helps." He nodded like she'd offered a weather report. "Did it try to enroll you?" "It tried to make me hungry," she said. "Same as before. More room, more light. Show and tell masquerading as service." She smiled in a way that forgave herself, and the world in equal measure. You don't realize how seductive help is until you stop offering it. He placed the binder on a cart marked policy and pushed it away from them both, a physical act that felt larger than carts and binders. "We've been closing rooms," he said. "I saw," she replied. "A classroom is a halo. Remove the head and the ring goes out." He exhaled. Air returned, new and regular. They sat with the ordinariness until it felt safe to move. "There's one more place," she said. "Not a room, a habit. We missed it because it doesn't look like class." She reached into her bag and produced a Polaroid sleeve with nothing inside it. No film, only the plastic frame. "Public kiosks," she said. "Photo stations in supermarkets. Self-service dispensers. The frames teach people to leave space for arrivals. That's the lesson smuggled in format. Empty space becomes an invitation. We need to make frames bad at recruiting." He smiled despite the chill of the thought. "We can't outlaw rectangles." "No," she said. "But we can be explicit about intention." She slid a printed card across the table draft language that belonged on kiosk screens and quick print counters. "This frame will not teach you. It will not ask you to return. It will not invite a witness. It will record what you brought and nothing else." It read like dry policy. It also read like a spell. "We'll send it to purchasing," he said. "Let engineering bury it in specification. The funereal kind of boring." "Good class," she said, and there it was again. The phrase that made completion sound like decency instead of conquest. He took her to the task force room because leaving people in interview spaces when they didn't need to be there was a habit the building had learned and he didn't want to teach. Under rooms, he added kiosks frames. Under fixtures, he added defaults. Under appetites, he underlined more room, more light. He wrote a new word and let his hand decide how big it should be. Boundaries. Around it, he drew a box that didn't quite touch the lines of tape, as if leaving a little air would help it breathe. They walked through the day with that steadiness, not collecting trophies, not staging epiphanies, only making promises to future routine. Marissa returned to her desk and left the lamp on. She filed travel vouchers with dates that matched reality. She requested and received a county badge with her name spelled correctly. Somewhere a shutter clicked, because shutters always click somewhere, but in the room where they sat, the fan hummed and the printer complained and a clerk in the hall laughed at a joke about toner. The world chose verbs with rounded edges. Late afternoon bent towards stormlight. Clearwater's porch lights lined up for evening. Grant printed 3 more copies of the maintenance bulletin and walked them across the street to departments that housed rooms capable of becoming classrooms without meaning to records permitting the library's basement. At each doorway, he said the same sentence. This is dull and important, and people signed for it relieved to participate in a dull and important thing. In a county where hurricanes teach you which boards keep windows from flying people, respect lumber that looks like paper. He returned to find the silver-haired woman, teacher adjunct to arrangement, sitting in interview 2 with the door open. No cuffs. A sandwich wrapper folded on the tray with origami care. She looked up when he entered. Not triumphant, not ruined. If anything, grateful. You've made it unfashionable, she said. What? To teach this, she said, flicking 2 fingers at air as if it were chalk dust. To enroll people without their consent, to recruit through frames and rooms. You didn't ban the appetite. You made it impolite. It's harder to pass on impoliteness than glamour. You're free to go, he said. Pending charges will route under fraud and false representation if we root any at all. He meant it as a statement, not a kindness. He didn't want to teach prisons. She stood. In the doorway, she paused like someone noticing fresh paint. You'll be tempted to collect a last picture, she said, to prove it's over. Resist that. He didn't answer. Not answering taught something too. She left without looking for glass to catch herself in. The hall did not offer any. Evening thinned the station. People went home to lights they could control with switches. Marissa stopped at his door, leaned against the frame with the tired posture that follows a day lived entirely in nouns. You wrote a box, she said, nodding at the board, the square around boundaries. I left a little air, he said. Good, she replied. Boxes that seal are coffins. He offered her the seat by the window. They watched the water change moods and the sky try on a few colors it couldn't keep. At some point, their silence turned companionable enough for questions to be facts. What did it say, he asked, between frames. It didn't talk like the person she said. It rearranged like a room. It suggested I step forward, then backward, then slightly left. It wanted me to earn a perfect angle. When I stood still instead, it lost interest. Rooms don't know what to do with refusal. He wrote refusal on a sticky note and pressed it next to boundaries. Outside, a low roll of thunder rehearsed a storm that might not audition. The building creaked the way all buildings do when they remember they are wood and metal and screws. Do we call it solved? He asked, knowing the answer, and wanting to hear it from someone who had walked the hallway with the lights on. We call it taught, she said, and we stopped teaching it. He filed the case under policy. A clerk later would ask rightly why not under evidence. Because evidence collects, he'd say. Policy prevents. The clerk would nod with the violence of agreement that bureaucrats reserve for sentences that make their work feel like stewardship. A week later, the facilities team sent a photo as proof of completion. It wasn't a Polaroid digital stamped boring. The annex wall now wore acoustic panels where the chalkboard had lived, the kind that drink echoes and give nothing back. The caption read, Noise mitigation installed. Grant printed the picture on the office machine and taped it to the drawer that once held the camera. Class canceled, see office for policy. He thought of Lena Cartwright then, not as a headline or a cold file, but as a person whose last act had been to hide a sentence inside a bracelet because she didn't have a room that would listen to it. He's not who you think. The words had frightened them into years of chasing pronouns. Now they sounded like instruction patient and painfully practical. Do not aim at the mask. Aim at the arrangement that lets a mask be necessary. He carried that thought to the shoreline the next morning before the heat woke. Bayshore Drive didn't look like it had in 1987. The diner was long gone. A smoothie place had learned the aroma of fruit. Waves lapped glass slow against rocks someone had arranged to make the sea behave. He watched gulls decide work was not yet urgent. He didn't listen for a bicycle bell. He let the air be air. Behind him, a runner's shoes stitched the path. Ahead, a dog shook off the ocean and looked relieved to be exactly what it was. He took no pictures. He walked the length of the old block and back, and left nothing there but footprints that would lose their edges by noon. The unit returned to cases that could be charged with statutes that had numbers, missing persons who wanted to be found, fraud that could be handcuffed without metaphors, a burglary with a suspect who apologized more times than necessary, the kind of crimes that end without epilogue when you do your job in daylight. Every once in a while, an envelope still arrived without postage. Sometimes it contained a picture of an empty room. Sometimes it contained a blank card with lesson at the top and nothing under it. They filed each under policy stamped received and stapled a copy of maintenance to the back. The envelopes slowed. Arrangements, hate, drought. On a quiet Friday, the library across the street asked if someone from the task force would speak at a community meeting about safety and photographs. Grant said yes, and sent Marissa. She stood at a whiteboard, not slate, and talked about porch lights and frames and consent. Nobody gasped. Nobody whispered. People took notes with pencils that squeaked, then asked good questions and terrible ones, and the ordinary kind that make rooms healthy. What do I do? If, who do I call? When is it okay to? She answered with nouns and action verbs, not with sermons. When someone asked if ghosts were real, she said rooms remember. Make them remember kind things. The audience clapped the way audiences clap when they don't feel played. It was the best sound. That night, after the meeting, a custodial worker replaced a warped window pane in the library's basement. He taped a small sign to the frame while the caulk cured. It wasn't official policy. He wrote it by hand. This window is for light. The marker bled a little. The sentence held. Grant found the sign 2 days later and left it up. He didn't photograph it. He didn't need to. The room would remember. On the anniversary of the work order that once brought 2 names into a flooded classroom to remove mirrors for safety, the county demolished Building B. A reporter asked for comment. He gave one bland enough to be usable anywhere. We are replacing space that taught the wrong lesson with space that won't. The reporter printed it under a picture of excavators and caution tape and the word redevelopment. It looked like nothing. It worked like something. When the rubble settled and the fence came down, a pocket park replaced the annex grass shade, a drinking fountain, a pair of benches that faced each other at a comfortable distance. No stage, no learning corners. A plaque too small to draw a crowd room, not class. People ate sandwiches there, and children dragged sticks in the dirt, and couples argued gently, then forgave each other without needing an audience. A dog water bowl that said "Be kind" sat under the fountain spout. Pictures taken there looked like afternoons. On a morning bright enough to embarrass metaphors, Grant walked through the park on his way to work. The breeze made the palms do that percussion only coastal trees can do. He paused at the plaque out of habit. A kid in a school shirt, early board and expert in benches, asked him what room not class meant. He said, "It means this place won't try to teach you anything you didn't consent to learn." The kid nodded as if that were the only reasonable arrangement and returned to a video about someone assembling a bicycle from a box. Clearwater's porch lights came on that night, because that's what they do not. Because anyone asked the town to stand vigil for a lesson disguised as a case. In the task force room, the board slid toward administration grants to write training modules, to revise budget lines that hid the word maintenance inside their syllables. Marissa finished a report and sealed it without wishing it into legend. The silver-haired woman sent a note without a return address that said only, "You have starved us beautifully." They filed it under compliments because someone had made a folder with that tab as a joke, and the joke had become dignifying. And if once in a long while a faint click rolled through a hallway at night, it sounded like the building settling, not recruiting. If a shadow along the window tracked a second slower than a body, might no one wrote it down. Rooms are allowed to remember. They are not allowed to enlist. What of Lena Cartwright? Of 1987, the file sits under policy because her sentence changed how a county arranges its light. Her bracelet rests in a drawer labeled returns, waiting for the day when objects can go home without teaching on the way. Her name is spoken when a classroom is designed with more exits than entrances, when a clerk chooses paper over glass, when a volunteer in a church basement says, "Let's hold this at noon." She lives in the decency of maintenance, in the refusal to stage, in the decision to make frames bad at hunger. And when people ask because they still do whether the case is solved, Grant answers with the only ending that honors what the town learned. It's concluded in the way that matters, he says. We close the classroom. If they press for a villain, he gives them a policy. If they want a photograph, he points at the park. If they listen closely, they hear nothing performing. The silence sticks to the walls differently now. It sounds like a room, being a room. Between frames is just a hallway. They walk it with the lights on.